as in the past, we intend to judge candidates on the basis of the record and not on the basis of party affiliation. As we approach the 1967 election, we must take note of the fact that this is truly a crucial election year. Mississippi is at the crossroads, and the man who occupies the governor's office during the next 4 years will determine to a large extent whether we are to make progress and, in effect, take our proper place in this union of states. In view of the fact that the Republican Party is fielding candidates for various offices this year, a number of important positions will not be determined in the primaries, but will instead be determined in the general election on November the 8th. Your executive board is therefore making the following recommendations to this convention. Then we pick up those 4 points out of as I read to you yesterday from the law of proceeding. Then the recommendations on district and state offices are as follows. Then we insert the candidates that we endorsed yesterday on a district or statewide basis. In view of the fact that many of our members will be participating in the Democratic primaries, and that they should be provided with vital information secured by the Council's interviewing committee, the following information is made part of this report. 7 candidates are seeking the office of governor in the Democratic primaries. They are, and we'll list them in alphabetical order. Even though only 4 of these gentlemen are considered serious contenders, your committee invited all 7 to meet with it to discuss many issues affecting the welfare of our state. Only 2 candidates met with the committee. They were William Waller and William Winter. Ross Barnett indicated a desire to meet at a later date, but never sought an appointment. No attempt was made by Congressman John Bell Williams to meet. We therefore assumed that he did not care to make an appearance. Now this is new. I didn't have this in yesterday. Both Waller and Winter currently hold public office, and both have good records of public service. Waller is presently serving as district attorney for the 7th District. That should be 7th Judicial District. I need to get that in there, 7th Judicial District. And Winter is currently serving as state treasurer. Even though both candidates are seeking the votes of working people throughout the state, neither's desires of the open support of organized labor or the endorsement of this convention. 6 individuals have announced that they intend to make the race for lieutenant governor. They are Byron D. LeBeckwith, Roy Black, Aubrey Henson, Paul B. Johnson, Charles Sullivan, and Troy Watkins. I had to get the newspaper to make sure I had it right, so I went ahead and wrote them in there. To our knowledge, no Republican candidate will make the race for this position. And as we meet, few of the announced candidates have actually qualified with the Secretary of State's office. This is true, isn't it? Has anybody heard any news today?
Yeah, I heard that there was only one lacking, and that was Paul Johnson, and he had made arrangements to qualify.
The morning paper says he has qualified.
Who, Paul?
Yeah.
Well, this is...
to be on the local
See, this is what happens when you get the deadline. You see, when I wrote this thing up, there hadn't been but one guy, I think, so we might have to change this part of it. It's really immaterial. Let me pick this up again. To our knowledge, no Republican candidate will make the race for this position, and as we meet, few of the announced candidates have actually qualified with the Secretary of State's office. This indicates that several of the announced candidates may not make the race. Even though most of the announced candidates had not qualified with the Secretary of State's office, questionnaires were mailed to them soliciting their views on numerous issues affecting the people of this state. Response to our questionnaire was limited, which means that your committee was not in a position to properly evaluate all candidates. Based upon these facts, we deem it advisable to make no recommendation, even though a Republican may not seek this high office. In conclusion, the executive board of this organization wishes to call your attention to the election of the legislature. For the first time in the history of our state, members of our lawmaking body will be elected on the basis of one man, one vote. Organized labor in Mississippi, along with the populace as a whole, have a golden opportunity to make significant progress in this election. The executive board of the Mississippi AFL-CIO urges the delegates to this convention, when they return to their homes, to redouble their efforts towards electing people who will support a program of progress for all of the people of this state. That's the end of it. Now, the only question, of course, I think, that But you might have in mind is the part dealing with the lieutenant governor's race. Keeping in mind that this report was adopted by the board yesterday, I wouldn't see anything wrong with leaving it in here. Let the people here know what a state of confusion we've had to deal with, see? You know, there's only one man qualified when we met, see? And this is the situation the committee had to deal with when we interviewed candidates, when we sent out the questionnaire. So what do you folks think?
I think it should be in there.
Do you think we've covered it pretty well as the board voted yesterday? We get a motion to adopt the report?
I so move.
Second? Any further discussion? Not all in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Well, we can now recess for the next 30 minutes till everybody gets here.
Till the next meeting starts, huh?
Right.
We can do like we had that dinner last night, Claude.
Yeah.
In
Yeah. Well, the delegates, please stand. We'll ask Vice President Edwards to come forward and give the invocation, please.
May we bow and pray. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we humbly come before Thee this day, a day that Thou hast made for man to use. Our Heavenly Father, we pray this day that this body would deliberate in Thy name, and whatever is done here this day would be in accordance to Thy will. We ask Thee, our Heavenly Father, to be with us in our deliberation. Be with those that cannot be here this day. Thou knowest the reason why. Be with all of our membership, our Heavenly Father, throughout the state. And may this organization go forward for the betterment of mankind in the state of Mississippi. Our Heavenly Father, this is our prayer in Jesus' name and for His sake. Amen.
Let me say we appreciate the fact that we have a good representative group this morning. Just looking you over, I believe we have all of our central bodies represented here this morning. And we're not going to take a lot of time on preliminaries. We're going to try to get right into our business as soon as possible this morning. But before we do, we got our musician primed to do a skit. We're going to have him play American. We'll all sing a verse before we get into the business, Brother Taylor.
Then the Fatherfield, the local union that owns this building for 17 years, to have some kind of song service before every local union meeting. And we don't want this one to be any different this morning. Everybody stand. We're going to sing the first verse of America. Won't you sing now? All right? My country, 'tis of thee sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where thy father died, land of thy hills and pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. I hadn't forgot it.
Now, before we get into the meeting this morning, I have a very important announcement to make. Some of you are aware of the fact that Dan Powell and myself have been having a tournament of sorts, and I can report to you this morning that I won the second round last night also. Now, some of you won't know what this is all about, but I'll show you a check made out on Dan Powell after I'll explain it to you. Now, for the benefit of those of you that this might be your first time to attend a state court committee meeting, I'll take a few minutes to explain to you the procedure. under our Constitution and bylaws in a political campaign, we first have a screening or interviewing committee that interviews candidates for state and district office. We make our recommendations then to the State Council's Executive Board for review. The board then in turns makes their recommendations to this group, which is made up of officers of the central bodies and our State Council Executive Board. Then the recommendations of this group will be made to our state convention tomorrow. This is roughly the procedure. The State Council Executive Board named the executive committee of the organization as the interviewing or screening committee. That's the five vice president, Brother Knight, and myself. We, because of the number of candidates running for governor and lieutenant governor this time, we decided to interview only those candidates running for the position of governor personally, and that would interview the other candidates by mail with a written questionnaire. Then evaluate all the rest. All the rest were interviewed by mail. Now, we would like to get this out of the way, get our report out of the way, and then because we want to get it mimeographed and distribute it tomorrow. We'll try to take this up first. If we've got this out of the way, then we'd like to meet with the officers of the central bodies after this meeting adjourns. Now, it depends on the amount of time it takes this morning to get this part of the business out of the way. If it takes all of the morning, if it's noon, we'll say, by the time we adjourn, then we'd like to ask you to come back here this afternoon. If we're lucky and can get all of the business out of the way before noon of the full committee, then we can go into the business with the central bodies before lunch, and then maybe have the afternoon free where we can get to work on this. Now, the agenda tomorrow is something I want to discuss with you, get your opinion on also, before we get into the regular order of business. We prepared an agenda for tomorrow that would recess at noon and come back at 1:30 and get into actually the real business. We wanted to recess and caucus, rather, by districts first, and make our decisions on the highway commissioners and public service commissioners and things of this kind, then come back after lunch. But after consulting with the board yesterday, it was their opinion that probably we could expedite this thing by caucusing at around 11 o'clock for about 30 minutes, reconvening the convention, and stay with it till all business was completed, which we should be able to complete the business by doing it this way by 1 or 1:30, which means we'd be through, and those of you that have a long ways to drive then would have plenty of time. The other way, if we recess for an hour and a half, come back at 1:30, we would probably be about 3:30 or 4 o'clock probably before we got through. Now, we left this open. We wanted to get your opinion on it before we formulated or finalized the agenda. What is your pleasure? Let's hear from Brother Moore from Clarksdale. You're probably the farthest away from anybody.
I have no objection to going right into it, but I don't think we should try to rush it on too fast. I think it would give enough time and sufficient time for people to talk it over and discuss it.
How about George Johnson from Jackson? It means what it means really, all is it means is you'd probably have a late lunch, is what it means if we went right on through with it. It wouldn't change the time element, I don't think, any at all. You see, what we do, and of course you can't really, all you can do is estimate the amount of time. I think 30 minutes will be sufficient to take care of the caucus business. Now, we have some preliminaries. We'll have to get the committees set up, get the report of the Credentials Committee, get delegates seated, get the rules adopted, which shouldn't take too long. we should be able, if we get this thing underway around 9:30 in the morning, by 10:30 we should be ready to start doing business, in my opinion. You see?
For the benefit of these people that have a long ways to drive,
Yeah.
might be more popular to go ahead and complete the meeting while you're at it.
Well, this is what we thought yesterday. The reason we're raising this question here this morning.
Another thing, the whole hotel checkout.
The checkout time at the motel is also 2 o'clock. We think we can get that time extended a little bit, but yes, brother, there's a man from northeast.
I want to invite you to come corner sometime so you can see how far it is.
Brother? Brother, I've made that trip from Corinth to Morse Point on several different occasions. I know how far it is.
Same statement I made yesterday, it's like, brother, well, we don't want to rush through this, we're down here to do a job, we want to do the job, and our delegates from Corinth come prepared to go back Sunday.
Well,
We didn't want to drive back Saturday, late Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, that long trip. It takes you about 5 hours to drive. You got to be.
well, we don't have to make this decision here today. We can do it tomorrow. Probably the best thing to do is to wait and see where we are in the morning after we get delegates seated and estimate the time at that point.
Well, we did the same thing, Brother Randall, just at that point, we came prepared to stay over for Sunday if necessary, on the thing. I mean, it's immaterial with me, if they
Yeah.
don't rush into it, well, that's fine and dandy with me, but, I mean, don't rush the thing on because of what.
Because of it. I tell you what I think we need to do. Let's introduce everybody. Some of you don't know one another. Let's start over here, Brother Hitchcock. Get up and tell them who you are, where you're from, and who you represent.
Bill Hitchcock from Clarksdale, North Mississippi Labor Council, the IEM.
Some more?
Charles Moore, the North Delta CLU, a member of ABC Local 149.
Awesome.
Howard Ellis, Jackson County, Gulfport, Mississippi, resident of CLU.
Robbie?
H.H. Robbins, Pascagoula, President of Office Employees, State Board, and President of CLU.
Which hat you wearing today? All three of them?
Board, Austin, CLU, Day.
All right, George.
George Johnson, Jackson, the CLU, CWA, 3511.
Ian Branson, Grayson, Central Lake Capital.
System Dunlap, Jackson Executive Board, Local 363.
Rubber workers.
Todd Glass from Tupelo, President of CLU.
What have they?
Bill Powell, President of Hattiesburg Central Labor Council, and President of International Copyright Union here in Hattiesburg.
Joe Mullins, AFL-CIO.
James?
James Jackson, Amalgamated Clothing Workers, and a member of the state board.
E.B. Edwards, CWA, Vice President.
E.J. Brown, Penner Local 433, Meridian.
Arden Taylor, Carpenter Local 387, Columbus, Mississippi, and also Mississippi AFL-CIO.
Look at these.
SHD's IBEW State Board. P.L. Nikkei, Aluminum Workers International Union Local 245, and a member of the board.
Harry Pickett, CWA, ECLU.
Samantha D. Jarrett with the Amalgamated Clothing Workers.
Doris Miller, representing Current CLU, and a member of the ACWA Local 207.
M.T. Bound, President, Carpenter Local 235, two Corinth.
Bud Evans, Vernon, Mississippi, that's Local 45.
Bill Williams, Harrison County, Central Legislature.
L.D. Clark, State Board.
Tell us who you are, Eula.
Hattiesburg, CLU, recording secretary for Local 563.
Yeah.
Bill Stanley, CWA.
Raymond, Greenville, still working for.
All right.
Union member of the 7th Region AFL-CIO.
What y'all doing, boycotting the meeting back there?
Racetrack license representative, working member of Pocket
Well, we all member of that committee. We all members.
I know.
Yeah, yes, a couple of late arrivals.
Joe Frank, Tupelo, CLU.
Good night, Joe.
Larry McGee, I can tell you,
Tupelo CLU.
no, I'm, coming from Lane.
Well, we're glad to have all of you here this morning. I believe we got all of our central bodies represented at Vicksburg, haven't we? Natchez and Vicksburg. Two of them don't have anybody here. Well, that's good. Huh?
Nobody in law.
And Law, that's right. Three of them. Yeah. But anyhow, we do have a good representative group.
Our girl will probably be here tomorrow because she is a service observer and she's a vessel understands there's just one of
In
her.
law.
And she is a delegate to the state, to the international convention.
Yeah.
And she was just afraid to ask out for too much time, so she will be in tomorrow.
Well, good. It's good to have all of you here. Now, I've got some committees. We'll have to have two committees. I'd like to run those by you. We'll have to have two, one on credentials, one on rules. And if you got any suggestions, I'd like to get them now. I've got a few names jotted down here. On credentials, James Jackson's agreed to serve as chairman. Brother C.E. Schaefer, Merle Davis, Beth Harbor, Eula Liston, Clayton Moss, Dolores Hampton, Ursula Cullifer, Doris Miller, and Floyd Berry on credentials. Anybody else would like to serve on that committee? We'd like to get those set up today. We're going to try to get as many people registered today as we can and conserve time tomorrow. Anybody else want to on that committee? On rules, we've got Marvin Taylor as chairman, E.V. Edwards, E.J. Brown, L.D. Clark, S.H. Dees, C.A. Dunlap, H.H. Robbins, and E.M. Grantham. Anybody want on that committee that I didn't call? Let's get some sergeant at arms. We're going to ask for volunteers for sergeant at arms.
As long as you're going on the sergeant at arms, I don't know what you want to do. We're going to have two traffic directors.
Yeah, we're going to have a couple of people out front. Let's see, who have we got?
Just call them traffic director.
Who have we got here that, I want to get Bill on that. He's got to decide. It's only about the people from Hattiesburg. Well, I'm going to get Brother Barnum down there for one. Brother Barnum, you'd serve as sergeant at arms, wouldn't you? They ain't going to amount to anything, just in case we have a couple of drunks show up and throw them out, that's all. Yeah. How about Joe? Joe Mullins, you'll serve on this, won't you? Okay. We're going to have somebody out front to direct them over. Joe, you're familiar with this place pretty good. We're going to have somebody to direct them tomorrow. Where to park and everything. We'll get with Tom and see if you would handle this part of it. Probably be. All right. Right. Where's Willie?
He's back in the corner.
Trying to hide. Hey, Willie, we got a job for you. We'll talk to you about it later. We're going to have, sir? You just didn't hide quite good enough.
It pays more than you're worth.
Now you learn to keep your mouth shut, won't you?
Go ahead and sit down now. You can sit down.
I ain't getting any volunteers, so we'll have to. Yeah, Billy Williams. How about you, Billy? You serve as a sergeant at arms tomorrow? We got 4. You reckon that's enough? That ought to be enough. Huh?
2 in.
Be 2 inside and 2 outside. Now, you know, tomorrow the convention will be at the community center. We'll go over that tomorrow. Remember that. And the problem, what we're trying to do is to get somebody that knows the town and show them where to park. They're going to park at the parking lot of the plant right over here. That's what we're really concerned about. I better get one more on this thing. How about Brother Hitchcock over there? You thought I was gonna get you,
my
didn't you?
private bouncer.
You thought I was gonna get you, didn't
Yeah,
you?
I was afraid of that.
Okay, that, yeah. Right, right. Before we leave, we'll give you directions to get to the community center, those of you that been here for the first time. Brought along some copies of our new labor directory. A lot of you's already received them. Well, we had the meeting with the CLU presidents and our executive committee, but those of you in the central body areas in particular should pick a copy of this directory up before you leave today. Huh? Yeah, go ahead and pass them out now, we can. Those that hadn't got them, quite a few of them already got them.
Those that want them, hold up your hand.
Now, on the agenda, it appears to me that the people that have the farthest to go have made preparations to probably spend tomorrow night, which means we don't have a severe problem on time. So if it's all right with you folks, we'll just keep our agenda like it is. And if it looks like we've gained a lot of time in the morning, I'll put the thing to the convention about how they want to operate. Is this agreeable?
Fine,
Huh?
fine.
All right, we'll keep the agenda like it is. We rest at 9:30. Recess at noon. Come back at 1:30. And stay in session till all business is completed. That's the way we've got it stacked up right now. Okay? All right, now at this time, we're going to ask Brother Knight to come forward and read you the recommendations of the State Council Executive Board to this committee today. And as I've already outlined to you, the report you adopt or your recommendations, whatever you do here today, will in turn be presented to the full convention tomorrow. Now, if we didn't have enough of these things, if I didn't bring enough,
Didn't I give you one?
if I didn't bring enough for everybody to get one, we got plenty of them in the office. Did everybody get one that wanted one? All right, good. Brother Knight. Yeah, do that first. Explain to them how we went about it. Well, before we go into the actual report, Brother Knight is going to explain to you, for the benefit of those of you that haven't participated in this kind of an affair before, the procedure, how we went about interviewing candidates, how we evaluated them, on what basis these recommendations are made. Brother Knight.
We have an evaluation sheet with 4 categories. Number 1, past record of the candidate in public office. Category 2, answers to interview questions. Category 3, chances of election. Category number 4, individuals or groups supporting and financing the candidate. Now, these are the 4 categories which the committee, the executive board, take into consideration in the evaluation of any candidate for any office. The highest grade in each category that any candidate can receive is a grade of 4. In other words, if you've got John Doe here, we'll say running for sheriff of a county, who gets a number 4 all the way across, in each category he would have a grade of 16. That's a perfect score. From that all the way down then to the poorest grade of 0. Each candidate is evaluated and given a grade 1, 2, 3, or 4 under each category. Those grades are total to the right, and that is the grade then that candidate's given. If you've got John Doe running for sheriff and Jim Smith, and John Doe has a total grade of 15 out here, and Smith has a total grade of 13, then the committee would recommend
Tom?
Doe. Yeah.
How about using the blackboard there, if you would,
All
and
right.
actually draw
Yeah,
one
that's a
off?
good
I
idea.
believe
Good
that
idea.
makes a little more sense.
Right.
By that, for instance, we're considering a candidate, and that candidate maybe is known to be receiving money, we'll say, from the John Birch Society. which as we all know is an anti-labor organization, being financed by John Birch Society, or an anti-labor group of any kind. This is what we're talking about here. Then this is one thing that we take in consideration, along with the other things as to whether or not, as to how to grade this particular candidate. Okay. You've got, we made two lines here. Well, we'll say Smith here, and Jones. All right. Record in public office, we'll give this guy a 3. Answers to questions, we'll give him a 4. It is 4 then. Okay, chance of election. Maybe he's got a 50-50 chance, we'll say a 2. Over here, groups supporting him, perhaps just mediocre. We'll say 3 then. All right, you got 3, 7, 9, 12. All right, this guy's record is very poor down here. We'll give him a 1. His answers to the interview questions are poor. We'll give him a 1. He might have answered a third of them right. Chances of election is poor, we'll say. And the groups supporting him are anti-labor groups. We'll give him a 1. Of course, this is a pretty sharp contrast. Some of them real close. All right, he's got a grade of 4. Okay, the committee would recommend Mr. Smith. You see, does everybody understand this procedure? If you don't, ask questions about it. Yeah, Billy.
Aren't you giving the incumbent there a little edge?
Well, I didn't say neither one of them's an incumbent.
Well, you got past record in public office. What if that either one of them's in public office?
Well,
One of them has.
of course,
One gets
this is something that you have to take into consideration. And I was going on the assumption here that neither one of them had been in public office. All right, we'll say that we'll rub this out. Let's just change this thing just a bit. We'll say neither one of them had a record in public office. So, but anyhow, this guy's past actions, you know what I mean, positions he's taking on things in the community. You have to consider these things. We'll give him a 2 here. Okay? Is that what you was talking about? Is this more nearly?
You got a candidate running against an incumbent. You'd have one to elect what he's done in office and the other.
Well, that's true. That's true, too. Well, we take all that, as I said, the guy that hadn't had a record in office, you have to take in consideration his position in the community on various things. You see, all right, we'll change this thing just a wee bit.
Tom, as a matter of fact, the incumbent could have a bad record and get 0.
That's right. That's right, too.
If all his actions are done.
All right, you've got 11 to 4 on that. Is there any other questions about this system we're going to use? Has everybody pretty well got it in mind?
Okay. Very good. Now, what we'd like to do here, frankly, is to let him read you the recommendations of the executive board to its entirety. And if you've got any questions or any amendments you want to offer, hold them until he gets through the report, and then the whole thing will be open for discussion, change, or whatever you want to do. Well, this goes in, you see here, you read it, or maybe I'll also read it. Recommendations, you read the officers here, and I pick these points up here, you see. Making the following recommendation convention. Number 1, see. And
on June 22nd, 1963, the second regular convention of the Mississippi AFL-CIO Committee on Political Education was held in Laurel, Mississippi. This convention went on record in support of a 2-party political system in Mississippi. The executive board of the Mississippi AFL-CIO recommends that this position be reaffirmed at this convention, and that we advise all candidates for political office that the Mississippi AFL-CIO and its affiliated organizations are not wedded to either major political party. As in the past, we intend to judge candidates on the basis of record and not on the basis of party affiliation. As we approach the 1967 election, we must take note of the fact that this is truly a crucial election year. Mississippi is at the crossroad, and the man who occupies the governor's office during the next 4 years will determine to a large extent whether we are to make progress and in effect take our proper place in this union of states. In view of the fact that the Republican Party is fielding candidates for various offices this year, a number of important positions will not be determined in the primaries, but will instead be determined in the general election on November 8th. Your executive board is therefore making the following recommendations to this convention. Number one, we got this on 2-3 different pieces of paper. I was trying to get it together. Number one, that the convention act on and make recommendations to the membership on only those state and district offices which will be determined in the Democratic primary. Number two, that the membership be furnished pertinent information concerning answers to specific questions, previous record in public office, secured by the screening committee of the state AFL-CIO and the AFL-CIO central bodies concerning all candidates seeking state or district office, as well as those seeking positions in the legislature. That number three, that the executive board of the state AFL-CIO be instructed to interview or attempt to interview the Republican and independent candidates seeking office at the state level prior to the general election on November the 8th. That number four, that prior to the general election, the Labor Council's executive board be authorized to make recommendations back to the membership in those cases that warrant such action, it being understood that the executive board may deem it advisable to call a special convention to deal with this important matter. Now, we make the following recommendations. For Public Service Commissioner, of course this is subject now. President Rounders spoke about the caucuses tomorrow. This is by Northern, Southern, Central District, Highway Commission, and Public Service Commission. These people will meet in groups from their district and will receive this recommendation and will act on that, and then we will officially present it to the convention. And all of our recommendations in the districts are subject to approval by the delegates from the respective district. Public Service Commissioner, Southern District. The committee recommends Ike Sanford. In the Central District, the incumbent is the only one announced so far as we know, Norman Johnson. We make no recommendation. In the Northern District, the incumbent, so far as we know now, is not opposed. That's Mr. Snyder. We make no recommendation. For Highway Commissioner, in the Southern District, the committee recommends Mr. Pyron of Hazelhurst. You'll recall, most of you well, that we supported him 4 years ago. That's Shag Pyron, S.H. Shag Pyron, I believe it is. The Central District, where there's no incumbent in the contest, the committee recommends Sam Wagner. In the Northern District, the committee recommends, I believe his first name is Herschel Jumper. That's for Highway Commission. As we said earlier, this will be determined finally by the people from those various areas. Now, on the statewide level, Clerk of the Supreme Court, the committee makes no recommendation. For State Land Commissioner, the committee recommends Roy Miller of Pascagoula. For Commissioner of Insurance, we make no recommendation. For Commissioner of Agriculture and Commerce, the committee recommends Jim Buck Ross of Brandon, Mississippi. For Superintendent of Education, and I think maybe we might comment just briefly here. This is going to be one of the more heated contest, I would think, on the statewide level this time. As a matter of fact, next to the race for governor, probably, this may create more heated politics than any other race on a statewide basis. We have running in this office Mr. Golding, who ran 4 years ago against the incumbent J.M. Tubb. At that time, he had the support of most all the people that are opposed to us and our views. And currently this time, he's trying to sell himself in a different light. As his opponent is the present president of the Pearl River Junior College, who has a long record as being a friend of the labor movement, Mr. Garvin Johnson, who has the support of Mr. Tubb, who is not seeking re-election. And I think Mr. Tubb's record as an educator, as state superintendent of education, is an outstanding one. The committee recommends Mr. Garvin Johnson. For state auditor, we recommend Mr. Hamp King, the incumbent, whom we supported 2 years ago. For state treasurer, we recommend Miss Evelyn Gandy, who is, as far as I know, unopposed. And as a matter of fact, I think Hamp King is unopposed as of this moment. Miss Gandy is a former legislator, a former state treasurer. For Attorney General, the committee recommends the incumbent Joe T. Patterson. For Secretary of State, the committee recommends the incumbent Heber Latin.
Explain to him, Tom, the reason why the
Rules in our political structure is that anyone that doesn't reply to our questionnaire is not entitled to our consideration. And this is the main reason for these spots where we make no recommendation. The very fact that they wasn't even interested enough to reply to our letter and questionnaire. Now, we're down to the number 2 spot in the state and the number 1 spot. And we make the following report to you. In view of the fact that many of our members will be participating in Democratic primaries, and that they should be provided with vital information secured by the Council's interviewing committee, the following information is made a part of this report. 7 candidates are seeking the office of governor in the Democratic primary. They are, well, I don't know if we have them here right at the moment. I think everybody knows who the candidates for governor are. Do you not? I don't think there's any point in reading the candidates right here.
We'll have them in alphabetical order.
We'll have them listed in this for tomorrow. Has anybody got any question about this? Everybody know who's running for governor? I think even though only 4 of these gentlemen are considered serious contenders, and of course we are referring here to Waller, Williams, Barnett, and Winter. Your committee invited all 7 to meet with it to discuss many issues affecting the welfare of our state. Only 2 candidates met with the committee. They were William Waller and William Winter. Ross Barnett indicated a desire to meet at a later date, but never sought an appointment. No attempt was made by Congressman John Bell Williams to meet. We therefore assume that he did not care to make an appearance. Both Waller and Winter currently hold public office. Both have good records of public service. Waller is presently serving as district attorney of the 7th Judicial District. Winter is currently serving as state treasurer. Even though both candidates are seeking the votes of the working people throughout the state, neither is desirous of the open support of organized labor or the endorsement of the convention. 6 individuals have announced that they intend to make the race for lieutenant governor. Byron D. LeBeckler, Roy Black, Aubrey Henson, Paul Johnson, Charles Sullivan, and Troy Watson. To our knowledge, no Republican candidate will make the race for this position. And as we meet, few of the announced candidates have actually qualified with the Secretary of State. And of course, this morning, as Claude pointed out, the news is that several more of these guys running for lieutenant governor announced their intention to run have actually qualified. When we prepared this report yesterday afternoon, there was a number of them that still hadn't actually met the requirements for qualifying. Let me get back here. This indicates that several of the announced candidates may not make the race, even though most of the candidates had not qualified with Secretary of State's offices. Questionnaires were mailed to them soliciting their views on numerous issues affecting the people of this state. Response to our questionnaire was limited, which means that your committee was not in a position to properly evaluate all candidates. Based upon these facts, we deem it advisable to make no recommendation, even though a Republican may not seek this high office. In conclusion, the executive board of this organization wishes to call your attention to the election of the legislature. For the first time in the history of our state, members of our lawmaking body will be elected on the basis of one man, one vote. Organized labor in Mississippi, along with the populace as a whole, have a golden opportunity to make significant progress in this election. The executive board of the Mississippi AFL-CIO urges the delegates to this convention, when they return to their homes, to redouble their efforts toward electing people who will support a program of progress for all of the people of the state. Mr. Chairman, I move the adoption of this report.
You heard the committee's report and motion to adopt. Do we have any discussion?
That includes lieutenant governor and governor.
What'd you say?
This last one there, no recommendation.
Yes.
Lieutenant
Right.
governor and governor.
Right. In the primaries it is. Now, I might point this out to you where we actually stand in this situation. If you adopt this report, it's similar to what we did 4 years ago. That means that under point 4 of the report, as he read it to you, I'll read that to you again. That prior to the general election, the Labor Council Executive Board be authorized to make recommendations back to the membership by mail in those cases warrant such action. Being understood that the Executive Board may deem it advisable to call a special convention to deal with this important matter. This means that this report will not be the final decision of our organization. There's a good possibility in the general election that we will be making recommendations. I can advise you here now that the Republican candidate, Rubel Phillips, has advised me that he wants very much to meet with our committee and that he would be seeking labor support in the general election. Now, what we did 4 years ago was taking this procedure, instead of doing it with the executive board, we called a state COPE committee together, this group here today, and that group actually made that decision. This is not a full convention, but we felt that it's more representative. We have people on the committee from all over the state, and the committee executive board felt it would be better for this group to make the decision than the executive board, and it actually was less expensive on the locals to do it this way. That's the reason we done it. Okay, Brother Clark.
Robert, I wanted to get the opinion of a few people. You know, in Lauderdale County, I presume what you said a while ago, you've been hearing a little bit the last few days of what's going on there. The campaign manager in Lauderdale County for William Winter, when he heard about the interview and thing over there, they're upset about the thing there. In fact, the business
Well, if this report's adopted, it means that we're taking no official position in the primary. And it means that you're free to operate as you see fit. If you want to join in the local effort for any particular candidate, then you're free to do so.
Brother Randy?
Yes, Brother Pilot.
Same thing is happening here in Forest County too. I met with the campaign manager for William Winter here also. And he's seeking help and was supposed to contact me this week. But I told him that I would not talk with him any further about anything pertaining to politics until after the convention.
Good.
This same thing is just about what he's talking about, so it's here in Forest County too.
Right.
Well, I understand what they were doing over there. They were considering possibly Jones, Lauderdale, Forest, and Jackson County, and probably Hines and Rankin and them getting labor support in the area, you see.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, Bill Winters told me that he expected to get a lot of votes in Lauderdale County.
Anybody been filling you out, George? How about your area up there in Clarksdale?
I was just thinking, Brother Ramsey, I'm very much concerned about it, at this point. The political situation up there, we could very well swing almost any candidate we so desired. But John Bill Williams, he got a toehold in Oklahoma County, no question about that.
That who?
John Bill Williams.
John Bell's running strong up there?
If we don't get some recommendation or something to go on where we can start a campaign in our direction, then we may wind up in trouble.
How about the Tupelo area? Where's E.V., which one of you fellas would like to hear from some of you? What I'm interested in is really finding what the sentiment is scattered around the state.
As far as Tupelo area is concerned, we haven't had any contact. Have you, Molly? There hasn't been any candidate for governor seeking us out, asking for assistance or anything of that kind at all in our area.
How about Corinth, Brother Dave? What's going on with that? You see, let's see now. We got, how about Greenville? What's going on? Nobody? How about the coast, Billy? What's going on down there?
On the county, on the statewide level, that's talked to me for Waller.
Waller?
And, he had talked, he came into the area, wants to go to a meeting and speak.
Yeah. Well, now, I appreciate the statement that two or three of you has made here this morning that you've advised these candidates that you're not going to make any commitments until this convention's made. And once these candidates find this out, that this is what we're going to do, then I think we'll start getting more consideration. But as long as they can slip around and make deals with some of our local people, as they've been trying to do, then that means that this organization is not going to be as effective as it ought to be. Now, a little more.
I think, Brother Ramsey, you hit the nail on the head there. Up in Oklahoma County, it is known by all political people, so to speak, within that county, that we don't make any moves in that direction. We have not been directly contacted by John Bell Williams, but some of the people that do support us outside the labor movement that have supported us in the past are beginning to turn in that direction. That's what I was speaking of. We can turn the thing if we get on it in time. If we don't, we may wind up in trouble.
Yes. Well, we can say a few things here today that probably we can't say in that convention tomorrow. It probably wouldn't be advisable to say in a convention tomorrow. I think that all of you need to be advised to the fullest extent about the exact situation we're in. You have in this particular election, you have a business community made up primarily of the bankers and such people as this, who are putting forth a concerted effort to stop Ross Barnett. This is what we really have in this election this time. All of them are frightened to death about the prospects of 4 more years under his leadership. and they have come together, most of them, to support William Winter. And the anti-labor element northeast Mississippi, this is where the problem is. Most of those people, like George McLean with the Tupelo Journal, who works on us all the time, are actually supporting William Winter. And the reason that Winter and the people that's advising him do not want labor's endorsement is that they're fearful of if they receive our endorsement that they'll lose that support in northeast Mississippi. This is really what we have, in my opinion. Now, this same group, the business community, have another candidate in the race. John Bell Williams is also their horse. They're riding two horses in this race. They feel that by getting John Bell in the race, that they can split up the Barnett vote enough to keep Barnett out of the second primary. This is where the real danger is as far as we're concerned. To me, John Bell Williams is more dangerous to what we believe in than even Ross Barnett. As a member of the United States Congress for over 20 years, he's consistently opposed any and everything that you and I believe in. You understand? I mean, it's important that our people realize that this man is put in the race for one reason only. Number one is to stop Ross Barnett, and number two, he'll be owned by the vested interest when he's elected. We have to get this message across to our people. Because I know in the 3rd Congressional District, around Jackson and places like that John Bell actually has his hooks in a lot of our own numbers. And we're going to have to get this message across to him that this man is anti-labor from the word go. Don't you agree? Now, again, we'd like to point out to you that if you adopt this report as we've presented it to you here this morning, it's not the end of the road. We'll probably be calling you back together after the second primary to make a decision. And at that point, I think we're going to make a recommendation. It might well be, it will be with a Republican, but we're going to take affirmative action in the next meeting we have. Do we have any more discussion on the report? You ready for the question?
Question.
All in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Do we have anything else to bring up before the committee this morning? This appears to me completes the... You got some announcements? Brought along with us this morning a tape of a TV program that I appeared on about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, Face the Issue. I thought you might be interested in hearing that there'll be a couple of interesting things come out of this thing to you, the Masonite strike in particular. I want you to take particular note the way some of the reporters tried to pin me down on that. While she's hooking that up, I'm going to ask Brother Knight to come on up and make some announcements. Huh? Well, the meeting will adjourn or recess. I want you to hear this, and then we'll get into the CLU business. I think we'd finish up by noon now. It didn't take us long this morning.
On behalf of the Jackson Central Labor Union and its membership, I would like to welcome each of you to Jackson. If I can be of any assistance to you while you're here, please call on me. I'll be around the meeting all day. And also invite you to come back to Jackson at any time if we're having a convention or otherwise. We appreciate you being in the city. First, we have with us to bring the invocation Dr. David Grant, pastor of Broadmoor Baptist Church. Dr. Grant.
Let us pray. Holy Father, we come into thy presence this morning realizing that we are in thy presence, asking that thy blessings may be upon this group of people that is assembled today to consider the welfare of each member of their unions as well as the total welfare of all people. We pray that thou wilt give them divine leadership as they deliberate over any type of matter that comes before them. Help them to be fair and honest in all their deliberations, and then give them the grace and that is needed to abide by the decisions that are made. We pray that all groups, wherever they are gathered, may be conscious of thy presence, and that we may see that the first and foremost important thing in our lives is to do in accordance with thy will and not any human will. So we pray again that thou wilt bless each union that is represented here, each organization, each individual, and help us all to be used for thee, for thine honor and glory. Forgive us wherein we fail thee, as we pray in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. We appreciate you coming and being with us, and we invite you back at any time. Our next speaker, to welcome you officially to Jackson, is an individual that needs no introduction to most of you that live in the Jackson area, one that has had a fight for the people here in Jackson for a number of years. The average people I'm talking about as a whole he works for, not just for any particular pressure group or otherwise. It is my pleasure now to present to you Commissioner Clark Horton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Ramsey, delegates of the AFL-CIO, ladies and gentlemen. I'm indeed gratified to have the opportunity to be here with you this morning. And I know that I speak for every citizen in the city of Jackson in saying welcome to your capital city for this convention. You know, I just more or less stressed your capital city. We in Jackson want every citizen in the state of Mississippi to know that this is your city also. In fact of business, we could not be the capital city of this state and have made the progress that we have without your participation. In fact, you own a good many things here in Jackson. For example, if you want to see a good football game out at the Mississippi Memorial Stadium, that belongs to every citizen in the state of Mississippi. And by the way, there are 4 good games lined up for this season. So if you love football, come down and participate and enjoy yourselves to some of those football games. And at the Coliseum, it belongs to every citizen in the state of Mississippi. And almost weekly, there's a variety of activities that take place for all of our enjoyments. Things such as ice volleys, rodeos, big cow shows, college basketball games, high school tournaments, and many, many more activities. And of course, if you love fishing or any type of water sports, this big pond of water out northeast of the city here, comprising about 30,000 acres, fishing is excellent. Now, you might have noticed that I said big pond of water because in recent months I've been confused as to what to call the big pond of water. I thought the thing was named the Ross Barnett Reservoir, and then I heard people calling it the Swan Lake, and then I heard people calling it the Winter Wonderland, and then I heard people calling it John Bell Williams Resort. So I'm a little confused as to what to call that big reservoir out there. To you people, I want to say thank you. Now, the reason I want to say thank you is this. I believe this from the bottom of my heart. Mississippi has made great strides in recent years. The number one reason that Mississippi has made great strides is this organization. We just have to face the facts. I'm not against any person. but I am against 100% the rich getting fatter at the expense of 95% of our people. And you are helping us reverse that thing. I believe this. How can a state, how can this city have as fine, if not finer people as there are across this nation? How can we have the richest soil, as good a climate, as good a rainfall, as good a timberlands, as good and better rivers and streams, and still economically be on the bottom of the ladder in practically every category? There's a reason for it. There has been a conspiracy going on in our state, in our city, that has hindered 95% of the people of making the money that they should rightfully earn, and this is keeping our whole economy down and hurting 95% of our people. Now, I would say what I'm saying in front of the biggest firms there are in Jackson or the state of Mississippi because I believe it. I don't believe in taking unfair advantage of anybody under any circumstances, but I do believe in fairness, and I know that that's what all of you are for and represent. Now, I know I wasn't supposed to make no speech, but I just had to say that because I say it every opportunity that I get. Again, to each and every one of you, when you're in Jackson, feel at home because this is your home capital city. We want you to come back to Jackson on every possible opportunity. And above all, every time you have a convention, please let Jackson be at the top of the list. Hurry back to see us. I hope this convention is a most rewarding one and enjoyable one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hart. Glad to have you and hope you will come back and be with us again. Now it's my privilege to introduce to you the permanent chairman of this group, one that has worked hard in the entire year, not just for this particular year, but from year to year he has proved his ability to work with us as a leader. It's my pleasure now to present to you Brother Claude Ramsey.
Thank you, Brother Johnson. It is a pleasure to have our people back together again to this reconvened convention. Due to the fact that it is a reconvened convention, I feel it would be more appropriate for me to withhold my remarks a little later on in the convention. There are a few things that I want to dwell on, but not at this particular time. I think that the first thing that I should do here this morning is to compliment our city commissioner on those down-to-earth remarks. It's most heartening to me, and I'm sure it is to you, to take note of the fact that we have one official here in the city of Jackson that really recognizes what has to be done in the state of Mississippi, and that he is proud of what we're doing. And I live to see the day when we'll have other officials here in this city with that same attitude, and I know that those of you that are residents of this city feel the same way, and that a couple of years from now we hope to have some other commissioners that have the same viewpoint as Commissioner Horton. The only way that's going to be done is a lot of hard work, but I think we got the people that know how to get the job done. I'd like to review with you the committees that serve the Hattiesburg Convention. The same committees are also at work here. Just to refresh your memories, on the Credentials Committee we have
Vice President James Jackson as the chairman, Miss Beth Harbor, Eloise Hampton, Doris Miller, Clayton Moss, Merle Davis, Eula Liston, Ursula Culliper, Floyd Berry. On the Rules Committee, we have Vice President Marvin Taylor, chairman, E.J. Brown, S.H. Dees, H.H. Robbins, E.V. Edwards, L.D. Clark, C.A. Dunlap, and E.M. Grantham. Sergeant at Arms, Malcolm Bynum, W.L. Hines, J.O. Hitchcock, Joe Mullins, and B.C. Williams. Those same people that served in Hattiesburg will also serve this convention. Simply a continuation. At this time, we're going to call on the chairman of the Credentials Committee, Brother Jackson, to give us a partial report, because I think we have some new delegates here that do not attend the Hattiesburg Convention, and it's necessary that those delegates be seated before we proceed with the order of business. Brother Jackson.
Thank you, Brother Ramsey. So far, the Credentials Committee has registered 108 delegates at this convention. Some of these people were in Hattiesburg, some were not. But it's easier to give you a total count and ask for a vote that the delegates be seated than it would to sort out the ones that wasn't here before. We also have 35 registered guests at this convention. The Credentials Committee moves that the delegates be seated.
You've heard the motion to seat the delegates. Do we have any discussion? Not all in favor of the motion signified by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. This time we'll call on the chairman of the Rules Committee for its report, which will merely be to read the rules for your information, the rules adopted at Hattiesburg. Brother Taylor.
Report of the Rules Committee, the only change being the time. Rule number 1, the convention shall be called to order at 10 a.m. and will recess at 12 o'clock noon for lunch. The convention will reconvene at 1:30 p.m. and adjourn when all business has been transacted. Rule 2, every delegate desiring to speak on any subject shall proceed to the mic in his area and be recognized by the chair, announce his name and the organization he represents. Rule 3, delegates shall not speak more than once on the same subject until all who wish to speak have had an opportunity to do so, no more than twice, no longer than 5 minutes at a time, without the unanimous consent of the convention. Rule 4, any delegate in the Mississippi AFL-CIO Cope Convention who disturbs the peace and dignity of the convention shall be barred from a seat or a vote in the deliberations of this convention. Rule 5, a roll call vote shall be taken at the demand of 30% of the delegation. Rule 6, the Cope bylaw shall be the guide on all matters for which no provision is made herein. Rule 7, the foregoing rules can be changed only by a 2/3 vote of the delegates present and voting. I make a motion that these rules be accepted.
Motion is to adopt the rules as amended, which simply is changing the time to convene the convention to 10 o'clock. Do we have any discussion on the motion? All not in favor of the motion signified by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. I'd like to review with you just briefly the agenda for the day, in order that you might have some idea about the time involved and when you might get out and things of that kind. We've had a series of meetings, of course, in the last couple of days. Began with the meeting of the screening committee, the interviewing committee, which is comprised of the State Council Executive Committee. Beginning Thursday night, we had then a meeting of our full executive board yesterday morning, and a meeting of the State Cope Committee yesterday afternoon. In preparing this program,
and making certain recommendations to this convention. Now, in putting the program together, taking in consideration that we have you might say, a two-pronged program going in our state, the never-ending business of the labor movement. One is organizing the unorganized workers, and the other one is trying to formulate and put together an effective political action program. It occurred to us this morning, or yesterday rather, that you would like to have a report on the activity going on in our state, the organizing activity, that we do have considerable activity. If you recall, at our last convention, we adopted a resolution towards this end, and we proceeded to have a series of conferences, meetings of international reps and what have you, to formulate a concerted, coordinated organizing program in our state. Since that time, considerable activity has taken place. We've had quite a bit of success in this field. So we have on our program this morning the Assistant Director of Organizing, Brother Bob Starnes, who is the coordinator of the organizing effort here in the state. And I've asked Bob if he would this morning to give you a report whereby you can go back and report to your delegates on this important part of our activity. So at this time, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you Assistant Director Robert L. Starnes. Brother Starnes.
President Ramsey, Secretary Knight, delegates to this convention, and friends. Claude asked me to say a few words. I told him, all right, but could I tell a joke? He said, yes, but you better be careful. And I say that in order to get into this. Reminded me of the commander who went to Vietnam, and he became quite concerned about the drinking water that his men had. So he was talking to his supply sergeant, telling him about the water being polluted, wasn't fit to drink. And the sergeant said, well, we do something about that. The commander says, well, what do you do? I said, first we boil the water. I said, that's fine, that's fine. Then what do you do? He says, then we filter it. That's good, that's fine. What else do you do? Then to be sure and be real careful, we throw it away and drink beer. And that reminds me of a friend of mine named Tom. I don't know his last name. I'll leave that to your imagination. But I ran into Tom one night in New Orleans, in Jackson Square. And if any of you are familiar with Jackson Square, you know that just across the street is the Jackson Brewery, where they make a pretty good brew. And this friend of mine, Tom, had the reindeers all hooked up, and he was feeling no pain at all. And I admonished him a little bit. I remonstrated with him. I said, Tom, you can't drink all the beer in the world. You can't drink all the beer even that Jackson Brewery makes over there. And Tom looked across the street, and there the brewery was, all lighted up and working. He said, well, maybe I can, but dadgummit, I got 'em working overtime. And one more story about a friend named Tom, and then I'll quit. This is about a farmer who raised cattle. He raised cows and he raised bulls. he had bulls to rent. And one evening he didn't feel too well, wanted to lay down. His little daughter said, "You go lay down, Daddy. I know all about the cows and the bulls and the birds and the bees. And if anybody comes to talk about a bull, I'll talk to him." So Papa went and laid down. After a little bit, here came a little fella. Looked like he was kind of excited. Came up and said, "Is your daddy here?" She says, "Yeah, he's laying down." Said, "I want to talk to him." Says, "Well, you can't talk to him now. If you want to talk about the bull, I can talk to you about the bull. We got a good bull. Daddy charges $50 for him. He's registered, he's got papers, and he's guaranteed, and the fee is $50. He said, "I don't want to talk about the bull. I want to talk to your daddy." She says, "Well, if that's too much money, we got another bull. He's $25. He's registered, but he's not guaranteed. And the charge is $25. He said, "No, I'm not interested in that. I want to see your daddy." She says, "Well, we got a third bull. He's not guaranteed. He's not registered. He's a good bull, but Daddy charges $10 for him." He said, "Listen, I'm not interested in your bulls. I want to talk to your daddy. I want to talk to your daddy about that son of his named Tom. Says, Tom's been hanging around my house and he's got my daughter in trouble now, and I want to see your daddy about it." Little girl says, "Well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to see Daddy about that, because I don't know what he charges for Tom." Any similarity between that Tom and any Tom you know is purely coincidental. I was much interested in the remarks made by our good Commissioner Horton. I was particularly interested in the remark he made, saying that the working man didn't get a fair break, that he had always been taken advantage of. And the good commissioner is right. He's probably more right than he knew when he made that statement. If we look back just a little bit into history, and I know that some of the speakers today say we shouldn't talk about past events because people are not interested therein, they're only interested in the present and the future. I don't agree with that altogether. I think sometime we need to look at the past to see where we have come from, or if we have come from anywhere. But if you will, and most of you do, read your Bibles, you will find recounted in the pages of that good book story after story about slaves, about masters and servants, about masters and their handmaidens, and the trouble that slaves had in trying to be treated fairly, trying to get enough to eat. And that was the beginning of the master and the servant doctrine, which carried over into English law and which later was translated into this country and is in one form or another established today in the statute books of the state of Mississippi. That fight between slaves and their masters has gone on from those days until today. Because even today, most of us are slaves. Possibly not in the same fashion that slaves were in biblical days, but you are an economic slave, if nothing else. The power structure of our towns and our cities and our communities
keeps you enslaved to a great degree, and it is done deliberately. But even the Indians in this country, when Columbus discovered America, had more sense than a lot of our people today. They had enough sense to establish themselves unions. Well, they didn't call them a union in those days, they called them tribes. But they got together for the purpose of cooperating with each other and for the purpose of doing together things which they could not do singly. For example, they hunted together. They banded together to build their villages. They banded together to cook when large animals were killed. They banded together to make their nets and fish, cooperating together in order to accomplish something for their livelihood which one alone could not do. And that's what a union is. That's what a union's all about. And since the first time that people got together during any type of an industrial era in the world, the industrialists have fought the formation of unions and the cooperation of people who work among themselves. You can remember back in some of our own history, the Haymarket Square massacre in Chicago, where people were shot down, shot in the back, trying to form unions. The Pullman strike, where the militia was called out and people were shot and the leaders were thrown into jail because they were trying to form a union. And many, many more instances just exactly like that. And I don't think we need to go into them now. But where do we find ourselves in Mississippi with regard to economics and with regard to unions? Economically, we find ourselves in Mississippi, where we have been for years, on the bottom of the list. And I have a recent wage survey compiled by the U.S. Department of Commerce as of April 1967. That's about as up to date as we can get these figures. We find the national average of wages in America for personal income is $2,940 a year. And in the South, Louisiana is $2,257. Tennessee, $2,199. Alabama, $2,039. Arkansas, $2,015. And I picked those states because they are the ones contiguous to this state. Mississippi, bless its poor, dadgum little pea-picking heart, $1,751. $1,751 compared to the national average of $2,940. And what do we find going on in this state to try to correct that? We find the industrial development committees telling companies which might locate in this state to move elsewhere if they have a union or might bring a union here. We find chambers of commerce telling plants which do locate, you cannot pay more than the prevailing wage in this area. We've seen the state set up a so-called research and development committee, and the chairman of that committee says he's going to show us in this state how to raise the average wage in Mississippi to the national average by the year 2000. And as I have said before, if that gentleman will come to any one of you sitting in this room, you can tell him how to raise that wage a dadgum sight faster than that and a whole lot cheaper than he's going to do nothing. The only agency that we have trying to help a working man is the labor union. It's the only thing you have, and it's the only thing any other person who works has. Maybe that's one reason we have fought so hard. And don't let anybody think that our enemies have stopped fighting. I might parenthetically tell you of a representative 2 or 3 weeks ago who was arrested in a town in north central Mississippi on 3 trumped-up charges: driving while intoxicated, carrying a concealed weapon, and having no valid driver's license. He had a valid driver's license from the state in which he lived, and his car was registered in that state and carried a state license from that state. He was held in jail for about 19 hours incommunicado before he was able to get out and get bond posted. Those things still go on. Most of the union representatives in this state who have any type, any semblance of a regular schedule are watched. Well, I think all the rest of us are watched too, but some of us don't follow any pattern. And when one of these representatives leaves his home to go wherever he's going, Tupelo, Corinth, Water Valley, or wherever it is, the business people in that town are advised that he has left home and he presumably is on the way, for example, to Water Valley. And they have their intelligence circles. They are having a regular meeting in the city of Jackson once a month to talk about what the labor unions are doing. And I think perhaps we've given them a reason to do that. Because we have tried to institute in this state a thing we call cooperative organizing. Excuse me. With the help of the state council, with the help of international unions, with the help of national AFL-CIO, with the help of everyone we could get our hands on, we had a series of meetings the latter part of last year and the first part of this year. International union presidents, secretaries, treasurer came, talked, listened, planned, and as a result, we are today holding our own monthly meeting in the city of Jackson once a month, where we discuss organizing, discuss the problems that representatives have encountered in their various campaigns, where we have been able occasionally to request representatives from one union to help representatives of a different union in an organizing campaign, and where I think more important than anything else, we have been able to keep down to a most bare minimum jurisdictional strife, because at those meetings we clear targets. And the other unions then, after agreement that a certain union is cleared and can go to work on a plant, they not only lay off, they don't barge in, they don't muddy the water, but they give assistance and help. I believe that we're having some success with this type of an undertaking because, as I've said and I want to emphasize, we have kept jurisdictional squabbles down to a bare minimum. They have been almost nil. But we're doing other things too. We have, I keep hitting that thing. I better keep my big fat hands down. We have in our regional office the duplicating equipment which is needed, and other equipment where we are now able to run off leaflets, prepare leaflets, help write leaflets for representatives who might need them in the various campaigns. And we have turned out a great number of them since we got that equipment. And as I started to say a second ago, I think we've been effective in some fashion because since the 1st of February, when we got this thing really underway, in the state of Mississippi, we have averaged a fraction over, for the average, 3 elections per month. And we have won approximately an average of 2 elections a month. Now, maybe that isn't much, but I think it's more than we were doing. At our monthly meetings, we also attempt to do this. We watch as best we can the various educational material which comes before us from whatever source we might be able to utilize, and we bring to the representatives pertinent court decisions, pertinent labor board decisions, circuit court decisions, arbitration decisions, or anything and everything of that nature which we think might be of some benefit or some help to a man in the organizing and servicing field. I think the representatives like the meetings. We will have from 10 to 15 international unions represented at each meeting. We have had more, but that's about the average now. And we'll have usually from 20 to 30 representatives present. And I want to say to you, Central Labor Union officers, that I have been trying to tell my secretary to put your Central Labor Union on the mailing list for the minutes of the meetings for the past 4 or 5 months. And I don't think I've done it yet, but one of these days you're going to start getting the minutes. I want to say also that anytime any of the presidents or secretaries of the Central Labor Unions are in the Jackson area on the 4th Monday of each month at 10 o'clock in the morning in this hotel, you are welcome, and we'd be very happy to have you attend one of these meetings. Now, I want to make one suggestion as to what some of you people might do. When an organizing effort takes place in your area. Now, every one of you has an interest in an organizing effort, whether you know it or not, whether you will recognize it or not, and whether you will admit it or not, because your wages where you work in the main are pegged to the wages in your area. And the more wages around you can be raised, the easier, the better, and the more raise you are going to get. And don't let anybody kid you about that. I might just throw in here a recent negotiation by the Steelworkers Union at a plant in Ackerman, Mississippi. Resulted in a wage increase of I believe over a 3-year period, basically 48 cents an hour, and adjustments which would run from 20 or 30 cents an hour up to around $1 an hour on top of that, plus other fringes such as vacations, holidays, etc., etc. Now, there are a bunch of people up there in that town pretty happy over their contract. I might add that the people in the plant voted to accept that contract when their representative was saying, don't take it, we think there's a little more we can get. But they were just so tickled with raises, it would run in some cases $1.30 or 40 or 45 cents an hour, that they couldn't contain themselves. Now let me tell you that something like that is going to help that whole area. And if for no other reason, the reason being to help yourself and help your family, now, you cooperate in these organizing efforts. And here is one thing I think you can do, and I think it's most important. Because when we start in a town, when a union does, usually the greatest opposition we have comes from the community. Many times more opposition from the community than from the company. From the so-called business people, the business leaders, the politicians, and sometimes the preachers. Now, if through your central labor union, or if you're in a town where there isn't one, your local union form a committee and go downtown and call on every merchant in town and tell him the XYZ union is in here and is trying to organize ABC plant. Now, whether those people go into a union in that plant or not is their business. It is not any business of yours. And we want you to keep your nose out of the business of those people in that plant. Because if they organize, they are not only going to help us, they're going to help you in the store too, because the more money they make, the more they're going to spend. And without stomping his brains out, let him know that if he does poke his nose in the business, you are going to take your business to some other store or some other town if you have to. And get that same message over to these infernal politicians who are inclined to publish full-page ads signed by the mayor and the board of aldermen, or signed by the board of supervisors, or some other people in public life, telling the people in a given plant to vote against a union. You let them know that it's none of their business. And if they poke their nose in the business of organized labor to try to hamper it, then you might poke your nose into political business to try to hamper them the next time they run for office. And I think some of them will get the message. And don't be ashamed of the fact that you belong to organized labor. We got too many people walking around with a card in their pocket they wouldn't show to anybody unless they were held up and the hold-up man took it out of his pocketbook. Now, you have a choice there. You have a choice of remaining silent, or you have a choice of telling the guy you buy your groceries from, I'm a member of a union, and union money is being spent in your store. And tell the guy you buy a pair of shoes from. And tell that filling station guy, they are the ones we usually have a lot of trouble out of. Tell him you belong to a union and it's union dollars he's getting. And as I said, you have that choice of being quiet or helping yourself. And I'm going to tell you one more story and I'm through. I said you had a choice, and you do. Before I tell the story, I want to say I'm very happy to be here. Very glad to see you. Going to be seeing all of you in your towns wherever you live. We're going to count on you for help because we need it and you have it. But on a commercial airliner, a young man was seated by a beautiful and voluptuous young lady. The stewardess came by serving drinks, and the man took one of these little glasses. The stewardess offered one to the young lady, and the young lady said, "What is it?" The stewardess says, "It's champagne." The young lady became indignant. No, 1,000 times no. I wouldn't touch that nasty stuff, that vile stuff. I'd rather do anything than to drink that. I'd even rather commit adultery. The young man says, "Hey, stewardess, hey, take this back. I didn't know I had a choice." Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm sure all of you enjoyed those remarks and that you are as proud as we are of the work that Brother Starnes and his group's doing. This time we have a number of guests present I'd like to introduce, a number of international representatives and organizers. Many of them are participating in the organizing program now in progress. We got Mr. Bill Lawrence with Aluminum Workers. Would you please stand, Bill? The back. Glad to have you with us this morning, Bill. We're interested in getting a report on your situation in Cleveland. He's got a real live campaign going on over in Cleveland, Mississippi right now. Might advise you that he cracked a real tough nut over in Grenada not long ago at that Rockwell plant. What's the former name of it? The Rockwell Standard plant. Had old Lion plant in Grenada. After about 4 tries, finally knocked that one off. I know all of you are proud to hear that. Brother Charles Arnold of IUE, who just recently went on IUE's staff, who's working in the organizing program. Where are you at, Charles? There he is. Good to have you. Charles is one of our local boys from out here at Vickers. I'm sure all of you are happy to know that he's on the staff now. J.B. Hanna, who's now working with the Laborers Union, who's also working in the program. W.L. Hines of the FL-CIO staff. I saw him walk out, I believe, a few minutes ago. He's working with the program also. Joe Mullins, the FL-CIO staff. Yes. Hey, Bob wanted me to advise you that Joe's boy just got in from Vietnam safely. I'm sure all of you are happy to know that, and that Joe's happy to have him home. And I see we have a visitor with us we haven't met yet with the Building Service Employees Union, Mr. Val Cox, Sr. Good to have you. And I guess they will probably be joining the organizing effort over here, we hope. And we got our old friend Cy Dugas with IBEW. Where you at, Cy? Just stepped out. Got the Vice President G.K. Fritz of the Painters Union, who's also participating in the program. Where are you at, Fritz? Well, tell him that I did at least get around to introducing him anyway. Ray Smithhart with the Rubber Workers Union. Where you at, Ray? Ray's got, how many you got going now, Ray? 5 or 6? He's got a number of campaigns going. He just won one last week in West Point. I'm sure you happen to know that. And he said got some boys sitting around him from up at Corinth that they organized there just a short time ago. John Gillespie with IBEW. Good to have you, John. He's a former member of our board and on the staff now of IBEW. IBEW just recently won an election out of Presto, and I understand that John's handling the negotiations. Is that right, John? That's the last large plant in the Jackson area to be organized. I thought you'd like to know that. Jesse Bingham with ACWA. Stand up, Jesse. Take a bow. Sue Herring, and I'm going to continue calling her Sue. She got another name now, Meredith. There you are, Sue. What? What'd you say? Yeah. Well, I know they'll all be glad to hear that. You were kind of like Ray Smith, aren't you? Keep more irons in the fire than anybody I've seen. ACWA does have several campaigns going on at the present time. H.L. Mitchell with the Meat Cutters Union. Glad to have you with us. Irene Dunlap, also with ACWA. A.E. Cox with the Meat Cutters. Frida Guyton with the ACWA. Florida Mercury. Glad to have you with us, Frida. We got Dale Allman with the Barbers Union. Dale, glad to have you with us today. Jennings Davis, also ACWA. We're going to hear a little bit more about some of their activities a little later on in the meeting. Edgar Barton with the Upholsters Union. Glad to have you with us. He's been on the staff of that union a few months. He come out of the Dean Industries plant at Pontotoc, one of the real tough nuts in that area. They fought the combined, the conspiracy we've been referring to here, but finally overcome. And they do have a contract in that plant now. With the progress that's being made in that area of the state, northeast Mississippi, I think it'll just be a short period of time that we'll have a real labor stronghold in that area. W.D. Christie with the Machinists Union, IM. Have you, Bill? Astounded Bill is going to come over before long and join the organizing program. M.D. Jarrett, ACWA from Hattiesburg. And V.C. Smith with the Papermakers Union. Where's he at? What's that? Okay. Brother Smith's not here. That's a number of international reps. We're glad to have all of you with us. And I'm sure that all of you are glad to have them and to know that we do have as much organizing activity going on as we have now. We have invited here this morning some people, several people, elected officials of our state, who were supported by this organization in the last election. We thought that you would like to hear from those people. We thought it would be nice to have them on your program. We invited the Attorney General, the Superintendent of Education, a new Agriculture Commissioner, and the 3 Highway Commissioners this morning to make an appearance at their convenience. And I see that your new Commissioner of Agriculture has showed up. He's here, Mr. Jim Buck Ross. So at this time, we'd like to ask him to bring Mr. Ross up to the podium, see if he'd like to have a word to say. Bring the gentleman on up. We also have a representative of Mr. Sam Wagner here this morning and Mr. Norris. So after we've introduced Senator Ross and he's had a word to say, we'll also ask Mr. Norris if he'd like to say a word. It's been my pleasure for the past 4 years to have known our speaker here this morning. Found him to be very honest and fair in his dealings with us. It was always a pleasure to have been able to work with him. And I'm sure that he will agree that this organization just had a little something to do with his election this time around. After all, he won, I think, by a little less than 5,000 votes, and I believe that we are able to muster at least 5,000 votes in the state of Mississippi. He has some real fine ideas about what needs to be done. As far as programs of the Department of Agriculture is concerned, and I think you'll be most interested in his remarks this morning. Gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you Commissioner-elect Jim Buck Ross from Peleahatchie. Mr. Ross.
I appreciate very much the opportunity to be here today. The state of Mississippi is a big state. As you know, I have been honored by being elected the incoming Commissioner of Agriculture and Commerce. You might say, well, what does the Commissioner of Agriculture do? The Commissioner of Agriculture is charged with the promotion and development of agriculture, the promotion and development of agriculture, and such other duties as designated by the legislature. Those other duties are mostly regulatory, inspection of seed, feed, and fertilizer, things of that nature. Now, I plan as Commissioner of Agriculture and Commerce to devote a great deal of time and effort to the promotion of agriculture. I think I can quote you two figures to very vividly show you why it's needed so much. In 1940, we had 293,000 farm units in Mississippi. Today, we have 98,000 farm units. 98,000 farm units. In 27 years, we have lost over 200,000, or approximately 200,000 farm units. It took us from the time of Christ up to the present time to get 3 billion people on earth. Experts tell us by the year 2001, we'll have 6 billion people on earth. Could I ask you this question? If that continues, or if that works out, who's going to feed those people? Now, I hope to come out with a program and see it become an actuality that will promote agriculture with the same vim, the same vigor, the same enthusiasm, and with as much resources as we can muster as industry and tourism is promoted. I think we get our income from agriculture, from industry, and from tourism here in Mississippi. And I'd like to reach back with a program of promotion and bring agriculture up even with industry and tourism, and let the three walk together into a better day for Mississippi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. I'm sure that all of you agree that we do have a very fine man now holding that position, that we will make some real progress under his direction. We have a representative, a gentleman representing Mr. Sam Wagner, who was not able to be here this morning. He would like to have a word to say of appreciation also. Mr. Knorr.
I don't feel very well in place here in speaking for a man of caliber of Sam Wagner, but we certainly do appreciate wholeheartedly the support given by the union people, you people. I want to thank you for Sam. Sam is your friend, and we have been proven that y'all are our friends. Thank you.
Now, we have a gentleman here that he doesn't know that I'm about to call on him. But if I know him right, he never caught short anyhow. We fortunate here this morning that we have a gentleman who is a member of the House of Representatives elect, member of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers Union, was elected by an overwhelming majority vote in Alcorn County. And I'd like to recognize Brother W.A. Stevens at this time and see if he'd like to have a word to say to the convention. Brother Stevens, come on up to the podium. Come up here and tell us how it was done. Now, Now, before we get too much further along, I want to advise you that Brother Knight will give you a report shortly on the outcome of the election statewide. We thought that you would like to have this report, so that is on the agenda. You will get that report before the day's over. This time it gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you Brother W.A. Stevens. He used to be a member of our board, by the way, Brother Stevens.
Thank you, Brother Ramsey. It's hard to try to fill in behind so many capable speakers that you have heard this morning. I would like to say that I certainly do appreciate the fine effort the labor movement gave me and the support in this recent election. I was able to win over two very good and well-known opponents. One of my opponents had been a member of the House of Representatives 2 terms. He had been elected and served 2 terms in the Senate, and he also ran for Lieutenant Governor in 1955. So he was no amateur in his sense of the word. So it was a real hard campaign, and I certainly appreciate the support the working men and women gave me in North Mississippi. And we had a lot of business people that up to this year have been opposed to the efforts of organized labor in North Mississippi. I think they're beginning to see the light. And I hope it will be by this recent election that will serve the remainder of the people that oppose the unions and the people that may want to run for office, that if you're really and truly serious about being elected, get in there early and do a real good job. Get on the issues that they can't attack you with or attack you in any way. And I think when they realize that you're working for the benefit of the state rather than some pressure group or some selfish interest group, then you're going to find that you're going to have more support when the votes are all counted than you ever hoped for. And I certainly do want to thank all of you for the interest you had in asking about the progress of my campaign. And it's just great to be here and great to be a part of this convention. Thank you very much, Claude.
Thank you, Brother Stevens. We certainly want to congratulate you, and we'll certainly be looking forward to working with you in the future. I have a wire here that I'd like to read. I see the Attorney General has arrived, but while they're bringing him up, I'll read this wire. We invited as I advised you before, the officials that were elected in the primaries with our support. We thought it'd be nice to have them come by. Mr. Garvin Johnson, the superintendent-elect of State Superintendent of Education, sent me this wire I'd like to read to you. It says, regret that I cannot be present for the Mississippi FFL-CIO meeting on September the 16th. Unforeseen developments require my presence on the campus of Pearl River Junior College. Please convey to your membership my sincere appreciation for the support that I received from them in the August 8th Democratic primary election. I shall try to justify their confidence in me. I know their interest in improved education for all the people's children. I am committed to working with all Mississippians towards providing a better educational program for all the children of our state. I shall need your continued support in this effort. Signed, Garvin Johnson, State Superintendent of Education. And I think that I can say here, in your behalf, that Mr. Garvin Johnson will receive the united cooperation of this organization. Well, I see another one of our guests has arrived, so at this time we'll ask him to bring him up on the podium. gentleman with us this morning who many of you know. It's been my pleasure to have known him for a number of years. We don't always agree on all issues, but there's one thing we can say, that when we need some assistance out of his office, it's always forthcoming. And it's a real pleasure to have with us this morning the Attorney General of the state of Mississippi, who was elected by the largest majority, I think, of anyone ever in the history of this state in this last election. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you Attorney General Joe Patterson. Mr. Patterson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramsey. Ladies and gentlemen of the AFL-CIO, I want to say in the very beginning that I appreciate the confidence, the leadership, and the membership of this organization, and I hope that it shall always be my privilege to enjoy that friendship and confidence, whether in office or out of office. Mr. Ramsey called me the other day and invited me down to this meeting, which I appreciate very much. And being the straightforward fellow that he always is, he frankly told me we do not expect or want a long speech, as we have a lot of business to transact, and we try to pack it all into one day, where most conventions take 2 or 3 days to have a convention and transact business a few hours a day and play the rest of them. We are working people, and we come to Jackson, we transact our business at our meetings and get back home. So I shall certainly observe that very appropriate request. Although, as someone said, when a politician gets up in front of a good audience, it's mighty tempting to haul off and make a big speech. You know, in our state, as we have heard so often, and particularly during the last campaign that has so recently come to a close, every candidate for governor, and I believe practically every candidate for the legislature, as I went about over the state, they all stressed industrial development of our state. In other words, all candidates, as I saw it, were in complete accord on industrial development. So were even members of the lawmaking body, which, of course, I think is very proper. And we have enjoyed for the past few years a large, or we might say tremendous, industrial development. But I have always thought, and I try to never lose sight of the fact, and that is that we cannot have that industrial development that we all agree is so much desired without good men and women to help run those industries. And of course, the men and women who help make that industry hum, to me, are among our finest of citizens. They are the people that labor and work. I've often thought, and certainly I am no authority on the industry. I was raised by a small-town lawyer up in the hills of Mississippi, and I still consider myself a small-town lawyer that come to town. But I've often thought it was my privilege a few years ago to go to Detroit, Michigan, visit some of my wife's kinfolks. I had always wanted to see the gigantic Ford plant, and I went down to what's known as the Rouge plant, which they say is the heart of the Ford Motor Company. And I spent a half a day going through that plant. And one of the most exciting things to me was to go to the assembly line and follow a Ford car through in the process of being built. I'm sure perhaps a good many of you have seen that. It's stand there and watch that frame come down the line and then watch those people on that line start building that automobile. And build it so fast until I was incapable of keeping up with what was taking place because I could only watch one side and they're working on the other side too. And finally see it go off that assembly line, a finished product. As I drove away from there, the thought occurred to me that the Ford Motor Company might have a $300,000 a year McNamara sitting up there in the front office who was considered a genius, production genius, and that he and his brain trust and his computing machines, he might have been a $300,000 a year man. Maybe he was. That's none of my business. But the thought also occurred to me that Ford cars could not go off of that assembly line without the men and women that I saw on that line putting it together. And Mr. McNamara could not have done that in spite of all of his brilliance. Then the next thought occurred to me that if Mr. McNamara was worth $300,000 a year to sit up in the front office, then certainly those men and women down there on that line, and especially those that I saw in the glass manufacturing phase of it, where the temperature was about 110 or 15, who could begrudge them a living wage for making that big empire click? And were they not entitled to a reasonable share of the profits of that industrial empire? And there's where my sympathies are always with the man who makes it click. The point I'm trying to make, my friends, is that as a citizen of our state, first, as a public official, if we're to have the industrial development that we aspire to in Mississippi, it won't be worth a nickel to us if the men and women who make it click do not share in the benefits of that industrial advancement and development. And it's a mutual proposition. Management can't make the industry click without good labor. And good labor cannot be happy and content in their work without good management. And therefore, it's a mutual proposition and not a one-way ride. And I think one of the greatest contributing factors to the prosperity of our nation that we have enjoyed the last few years and are still enjoying, although we have the price spiral going along to offset it, but I think one of the greatest contributions to American prosperity is the fact that the working men and women of this nation have banded themselves together in good organizations and at times have been compelled to demand that they get a fair share of the fruits of their labor. And if they did not do that, then what would we have? We would have a concentrated wealth in the hands of a few while the masses toiled. And as for myself, I think it nothing but fair. I think it contributes to the prosperity and development of the nation that the men and women who make these industrial empires click enjoy a fair share of the profits and fruits of their labor. And may we all continue in that kind of a relationship. As I say again, I was not here to make a big speech or a long one. I did want to say that because I firmly believe in that principle. Anytime I may be of service to you and your good organization, as Mr. Ramsey has told you, the door of my office is always open, and my name's in the telephone directory. And my secretary has strict instructions at all times to never say that the Attorney General's out when he, in fact, is in. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. We certainly appreciate the fact that you were able to come by this morning, and we do appreciate the cooperation that we've received down through the years out of your office. Now, at this time, we're gonna call on Secretary of Treasury Knight, Cope Director, to give you a summary of the results of the last election. I'm sure that all of you will be interested in the progress that has been made. We think that there's been significant progress made in this election. We think probably that we have more friends in the Mississippi legislature this time than we've ever had, due to the efforts of the people represented here, the people that you represent back home and those here. While he's getting his stuff together, I'd like to mention just one or two myself that are, in my opinion, really significant. We had a state senator from Alcorn County who did not seek labor support, who had an opponent that did seek our support, and our people did recommend him to their membership. Senator Dean, the incumbent, saw fit to reproduce the endorsement in that area, run it in an ad in the newspaper, started to run against organized labor in the area. This is the same area that W.A. Stevens comes from, same county, same section. Well, it didn't work. Senator Dean got defeated by an overwhelming majority, and today we have a good friend in the Senate also from Alcorn County. And Senator Smith, the senator-elect, advised me just recently while he was in Jackson that he felt that this old bugaboo about the endorsement of organized labor had been put to bed once and for all in Alcorn County. He thought that people running for office now would be seeking the support and endorsement of organized labor in the area. The same thing applies in other areas of the state, and I'm sure that Brother Knight will review those with you. So at this time, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you your own Cope Director and Secretary of Treasury, Brother Knight.
Mr. President, brothers and sisters, I realize you've already had quite a bit of conversation this morning and speaking, and I'm going to, I hope, surprise you by being kind of short-winded this morning. I may call a few names. The press is not here. I don't think they are. However, I'd like to say what I'm going to say in the presence of the press. But our experiences has been that you can't trust the press in Mississippi, and it would come out in the headlines right in reverse to what it was said. So we have to operate on that basis. We have gone through the Democratic primaries again here in Mississippi. I don't really know where to start. There's been quite a bit of difference in these campaigns this time. In the past years, if organized labor endorsed a candidate for any office, everybody else in the race and everybody in the community taking out after that candidate or those candidates. Well, this happened in just one or two or maybe three isolated situations in the state, as President Ramsey just mentioned one. In one other was the race for highway commissioner in the Northern District. And I'm told that a couple of days before the second primary that the incumbent and now defeated candidate for the commission
Mr. Adams, injected labor into that campaign. And it was no secret that labor had endorsed Herschel Jumper. Well, Herschel Jumper told me himself the other afternoon, and our leadership in that area had already told me. They were satisfied that that was what put the icing on the cake when Roy Adams attacked Herschel Jumper as a product of the AFL-CIO. That finished Mr. Adams off. Down in the Southern District, where we had a real hot race for highway commissioner, where we had a real coalition, and probably one of the most effective coalitions that have been put together in the history of the state of Mississippi, we beat the biggest single political machine in the state. This includes a machine that any governor might put together. The present commissioner down there, John D. Smith of Mendenhall in Simpson County, had been commissioner for 20 or 24 years. And never before had there been a runoff in that district. Unlike the years before, the candidate that we endorsed, Shag Pyron, led in the first primary by between 13,000 and 14,000 votes. And he defeated the incumbent by better than 40,000 in the second primary. Out of 28 counties, out of 30 counties, Shag Pyron carried every county but Smith's home county of Simpson and my home county of Forest. And Smith's margin in Forest was less than 900 votes. And any time you break into the power structure in Forest County, as my fellow Forest Counties can tell you, you really go in something. The people got tired. The people got tired of John Smith and his machine. And I don't mean to be calling counties now and showing partiality. But as I recall, the margin for Shag Pyron in Jackson County was 2-1 or better. So the people really did a good job. The labor movement and the Negro citizens of the Southern District brought about a change. This coalition worked in the Northern District. This coalition worked in the Central District. As a result of that, we got a brand new highway commission. A brand new. And that's the first time that's happened in my lifetime, and maybe most of your lifetime. There's a few here older than I. So I think this is progress. As you recall, when we left Hattiesburg on June the 10th, we didn't leave there with the intention of electing a governor or a lieutenant governor favorable to us. We left that for them to beat one another's brains out, and it's a tragedy that they all didn't get a hold of a machine gun. You'll hear more about this later. Our intentions were to concentrate in the district contest and in the county contest and in the contest for the legislature. Now, if I stood here this morning and told you that we won an overwhelming number of legislative races, I'd be misrepresenting the facts. But I think the most important thing here is this. When we leave the district races, is the fact that it was the quality rather than the quantity, really. But let's back up for just a minute before we get into that. I started off talking about this business of labor candidates being attacked by the opposition in the past, and it was a tremendous effort as compared with what went on this year. But let's back up and look at the other statewide races. You recall, we endorsed the following people. Secretary of State Heber Ladner, only token opposition. Attorney General Patterson, you've just seen and heard him. State Treasurer Evelyn Gandy, no opposition. State Auditor Hamp King, no opposition. Superintendent of Education Garvin Johnston, elected. Commissioner of Agriculture, you've just heard Mr. Ross, elected.
And of course, State Land Commissioner Roy Miller, incidentally a member of organized labor from Jackson County. Roy Miller wasn't known that I know of particularly throughout the state. As I recall, there were some 8 to 10 people running for the office of Land Commissioner. This was one wherein the incumbent did not seek re-election. This was up for grabs. Well, I don't have to tell you that Roy Miller went into the second primary, not by a large margin. As a matter of fact, it was 3 or 4 days before they determined whether it would be Miller opposing Carter or whether it would be Sullivan opposing Carter. And Miller doesn't have anything to be ashamed of with the race that he ran, even though he was defeated in the second primary. And my friends, that was because the fact that he got in the second race was because of our endorsement. And I'm here to tell you that had we not endorsed Jim Buck Ross, he wouldn't have stood here this morning as the Commissioner of Agriculture elect, because Cy Corley would have beat the dickens out of it. And had we not endorsed Garvin Johnston, Boyd Golden would have beat the dog out of him. So don't let nobody tell you that the endorsement of organized labor puts the lid on the coffin. It just don't do it. So I think that we have a pretty good record here, thanks to you and your membership. I think we have a real good record in state offices and in district offices. It's rather discouraging, and I'm rather saddened over the fact that we lost one of the best friends that we had in the state legislature, and one of the best friends we've had for a long time as a man. And this was in the race for Public Service Commissioner in the Southern District, our good friend Ike Sanford. Ike was running against a tremendous machine. The Public Service Commissioner, like the Highway Commissioner, can build up a tremendous machine, my friends. And the railroads, and the bus companies, and the power companies, and the telephone companies were along with Bucky Moore, and you can't beat that bunch. So Ike Sanford run a pretty good race after all, but it just wasn't good enough. I saw him one afternoon this week, and he told me that he wanted us to know that he knew that we was the one group of people that stuck with him all the way through, and that he would never forget that. So we have to take some of the bitter along with the sweet. Now in the race for the legislature. First, let me say this, and I certainly want the people from Greenville Central Body area to know that we're not condemning anybody here. I just want to point out the fact that one of the most heartbreaking defeats that we take in the legislative contest was in the Greenville area, the counties of Sharkey, Issaquena, and Washington County, wherein we had one of the most notorious anti-human, if I may use that expression, members of the legislature in the name of Mr. C.B. Buddy Newman, who was one of Ross Barnett's right-hand men when he taken on the Army of the United States at the Ole Miss to keep James Meredith out. Mr. Newman was one of the 3 high-powered, highly coordinated representatives of the then Governor Barnett, who went to Oxford to take the situation in hand. He's chairman of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. And as a result of the legislative reapportionment, he was thrown into the same House district with a very fine man, and the people from Greenville can attest to this, Mr. Albert Miller, who was the representative from Sharkey County, and one of the finest men in the legislature. And Mr. Miller, of course, was defeated not by a landslide, but by too many votes to suit us, by Mr. Newman. Mr. Miller carried Mr. Newman's home county. But when he got to Washington County, somehow or other, some of the powers that be got to some of our people, and I could name a number of ways I think they did this, but this wouldn't serve any purpose now.
But this is one race that we lost that would have meant much to the state of Mississippi if we could have defeated Mr. Newman. But looking at another county in this state, we scored probably the most single important victory in the legislature. And this again was brought about by a coalition of our forces and the colored community. And I'm talking about none other than Clay County, Mississippi. And the man we defeated was the most antagonized and probably the most rabble-rousing, demagoguery type person that the legislature has ever seen. And that was in the person of Mr. Thompson McClellan, chairman of the powerful House Judiciary Committee, who was not even in the second primary. He run third in a field of 3 candidates. And the man that we supported led the ticket and was elected in the second primary. Now, he is not altogether what we would like in a candidate, but I'll say to you, he'll be new, and he won't become chairman of the Judiciary Committee right off of the bat. And I have an idea that he has gotten the message by now where he got his margin at. And I'll say to you that if he don't act right this 4 years, this will be the first and the last term he'll serve in the House of Representatives. In another particular situation, and again, let me emphasize the fact that I'm not here bragging on any particular group or any particular county, but I'm just simply pointing out some strategic situations here. I want to mention a situation where there's no central labor union in Mississippi that has jurisdiction. Under the new legislative apportionment, we have 2 House seats in Tallahatchie and Yalobusha County. This is Charleston and Water Valley. Now, we have a pretty good little labor movement in both counties. More union members in Yalobusha County than we do in Tallahatchie County. Tallahatchie County is the home of the much publicized chairman of the House Rules Committee, Mr. George Payne Cosser. Mr. Cosser couldn't be classified as a friend of ours. He hadn't been for the last 30 years. Mr. Cosser wants to be Speaker of the House of Representatives. Well, I don't mind telling you here this morning, as the people in that area will attest to, we did everything we could to get a candidate to oppose Mr. Cosser in Tallahatchie and Yalobusha County. Well, we really failed, but the message got to the people. President Ramsey began to have visits from other members of the legislature, from other sections of the state. He began to have telephone calls from Governor Paul Johnson's associates and aides. Won't know why in the world we is taken out after Representative Cosser, such a distinguished Mississippian. Well, we wound up with no opposition. We let it drop back. In the race for post 2 in this particular district, we had a young man in Yalobusha County who decided that he would unseat Representative Bailey, who has been in the legislature 2 or 3 terms. Mr. Bailey is not as bad as some. He's not as good as some other people. In lieu of a central body, the local unions were pretty well free to take whatever action they felt according to our rules and procedure in handling political matters into their own hands and do what they felt best for the labor movement in that particular legislative area. The people in Yalobusha County invited both of these men to come to their meeting and to speak to them in order that they might be in a position to judge them based on their views on the issue. The incumbent representative didn't see fit to meet with labor. The young man who was seeking that position saw fit to meet with labor. Consequently, labor decided in Yalobusha County to support Mr. Oscar Mackey. Well, they corresponded with the people over in Tallahatchie County. The Negro leadership was conferred with a number of times in both counties. There's a matter of fact, a labor delegation, along with a delegation of the Negro community from Yalobusha, called on the Negro people in Tallahatchie County and carried Mr. Mackey's material over there. He met with the people, white and Negro alike. He told them what he believed in and what he proposed to do. Consequently, Mr. Mackey defeated Mr. Bailey by an overwhelming majority in both counties. Now, in the meantime, Mr. Kosser had decided that he had better support Mr. Bailey through his son, as I understand it, in conjunction with the senator from that county who had no opposition. And the senator, again, it wasn't our friend. So Mr. Kosser got the message. And he told the representative-elect, since the second primary, that he could see now that he would have to change his voting record or else he was serving his last term in the House of Representatives of Mississippi. I say to you, if we could have got a candidate against Mr. Kosser, he'd have been in the same shape as Mr. Bailey this morning, an ex-representative. Because we had the coalition there. We had the votes, my friends, to beat him. So you see, we made some tremendous progress here in this election. Again, it's not all in the number of contests we participated in where we won, but it's the way we did it, and it's the particular contest. We had a member of our union in Alcorn County who was elected to the legislature. I don't know, I wasn't in this morning. President Ramsey may have already mentioned it. Unfortunately, we had a good member of ours defeated over in Warren and Claiborne County, Brother Dan Butler with the Barbers. But the guy beat him, no anything to brag about. He just barely beat him. And again, we didn't quite do our homework over there in Claiborne County just like we should have done. In all, in the state Senate, we elected 9 senators. 8 were defeated that we endorsed. In the House of Representatives, there were 18 that we endorsed, elected, and 19 defeated. Now, some of these defeats were real close. And of course, by the same token, some of those elected were real close. As I told you a moment ago, we had 6 state officials that we endorsed elected, 1 defeated. We had 3 district people elected and 1 defeated. We had a total here of 36 people elected and 29 defeated. And as I said, this is not a great figure to point to overall, wins against loss. But some of them got the message this time, my friends, that we are out, and that we are out, and we mean business. And I say to you that we lost a number of contests because of finagling on the part of the power structure. We lost a number of contests because the power structure hadn't yet give up. And I'd say this morning that some of these contests were bought. And I have to say in all frankness that a lot of our Negro citizens who can't read and write, and even some of the white people in this state who can't read and write, vote was stole by the power structure that names the election officials simply because they knew they couldn't read and write, my friends. Let me tell you, I don't know if you're familiar with the law here. The law in this state says that an incapacitated person, a person who maybe doesn't have any arms, or a person who has the palsy, just to mention one of a number of diseases that could cause the same, who can't use a pen or a pencil. When they go in a polling place to vote, they can, within the law, ask for a friend of theirs to go in and mark that ballot form. But an illiterate person who cannot read and write, whether it be black, white, green, pink, purple, or what have you, has to be assisted by one of the duly elected or appointed election officials. Now, let me say this. I know
delegation from Water Valley and Charleston and West Point. Please stand. We'd like to take a look at you here. People from those local unions, stand up and let us take a look at you. Water Valley. Do we have anybody here from West Point? Stand up. Oh, there she is. She stood up. Well, I just wanted the rest of the convention to see who you were, because in my opinion, you really did this state a service. I consider the defeat of Thompson McCullough. The defeat of Thompson McCullough, as I started to say, I think was one of the most significant things that happened in the state. Tom just advised me that he should have mentioned that Harrison County elected more candidates than any other area of the state, candidates supported by organized labor in that area. This is the legislative candidates. Now, it's 10 minutes to 12. We, according to the rules, are supposed to recess for lunch at 12 o'clock and come back at 1:30. And it's up to you folks. We have the main business left now on the agenda as a recommendation by the State Council Executive Board on a legislative program, and of course the State Cope Committee's report on the general election. This is a major business before the convention. We would like to have a caucus of delegates from the 3rd Congressional District after we recess. We want to talk to you about the possibility that exists there in that district. We want to get you together while you're here after we adjourn this convention. Now, it's up to the delegates, up to the convention, as to whether they want to recess and come back at 1:30 or whether you want to change the time, the agenda. So we're going to place that before you at this time. I don't think it would take too long to complete the business if you'd like to stay through it. Of course, depends on the amount of discussion that we have. We might well finish by 1 or 1:30, something like that. But if you prefer to recess according to the rules, that's what we'll do. Do we have any suggestions here? Brother Sims? We have a motion that we continue until all business is completed. Do we have a second to that motion? Brother E.B. Edwards. Well, the motion, we already have a motion here that will continue on. We'll have to put that first, and then if you want to offer that motion to recess, we can. Your motion did get a second, I believe, didn't it, Brother Sims? Did we get a second of that motion to continue on? Okay. All right, the motion before the House is to continue on till the business is completed. Do we have any discussion on that motion? Now, this, in effect, amounts to a change in the rules, and it'll take a 2/3 vote. I want you to make sure you understand this. All in favor of continuing on according to the motion signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Very weak here, very weak here. Chair's undecided. All in favor of the motion, please stand. That's the motion. Delegates, please be seated. As I advised you this morning, the State Council Executive Board yesterday felt that we should, at this convention, submit a revised legislative program for your consideration. You have a copy of that before you. At this time, I'm going to ask Vice President Marvin Taylor to present that report. Brother Taylor.
Resolution number 2, submitted by the Mississippi AFL-CIO Executive Board. Whereas the 18-point program entitled Program of Progress, adopted by the Mississippi AFL-CIO some years ago, has become somewhat outmoded. Some of the objectives have been attained by actions of the state legislature, the National Congress, and the courts, such as reapportionment of the legislature, providing loans to college students, raised teachers' salaries, increased old age assistance, eliminate poll tax as a requirement for voting, equal pay for women, and so forth. And whereas in the absence of a current, revised, and positive program, we find ourselves reacting to other organizations' programs rather than acting on our own planned, designed program. Therefore, be it resolved that the following named objectives will constitute the legislative program of the Mississippi AFL-CIO. 1. Establish a State Department of Labor. 2. Amend law to provide the annual sessions of the legislature. 3. Amend the election laws to provide A. Improved system of counting ballots. B. Expand absentee voting law. C. Revise residency voter requirement. D. Hold elections on Saturday. 4. Amend and upgrade workmen's compensation law. 5. Amend and upgrade unemployment compensation law. 6. Secure passage of compulsory school attendance law. 7. Secure the necessary enabling legislative acts to separate the office of sheriff and tax collector, allowing the sheriff to succeed himself in office. 8. Uniform reevaluation and assessment of property. Be it further resolved that this legislative program be made available to the governor, the lieutenant governor, all members of the Senate and House of Representatives, and to all officers and local unions and central bodies, and be it finally resolved that all officers of local unions and central bodies and any other interested person be urgently requested to arrange conferences with their respective legislators and get their approval on this program. Mr. Chairman, I move the adoption of resolution number 2.
You've heard the motion to adopt resolution number 2. Do we have any discussion? Sam said he seconded it. Anyone like to speak on the motion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Now I'd like to emphasize the need of the delegates present to carry out this resolution, especially the part of it that requests that you contact the members of your legislative delegation and advise us on those commitments. We'd like very much to know where we stand, how many votes we can expect on all of these items before that legislature convenes in January. I know that some of you have been keeping records already of the questionnaires. You've got commitments already in advance in some of those counties where you supported candidates. It might well be that all you'd have to do is to check off these items where they've committed already and just let us know where they stand. It might not be necessary for you to go back to them again. But we are encouraged, as Brother Knight pointed out to you this morning, about the possibility of making some real progress in this legislature. It may be that I should take just a few minutes and review some of the improvements that we have. Even though we did not formally endorse a candidate for lieutenant governor in Hattiesburg, I feel that we are in a position now to at least have the ear of the present lieutenant governor. Mr. Sullivan contacted us after our Hattiesburg convention seeking our support. Of course, we advised him that we could not formally support him because the convention had already convened, but that we would advise our local unions about his position, and that probably our locals might support him under these conditions. And I think this is really what happened. We were able also to influence some other people as well, and his margin of victory, I think, was large enough to indicate that we did have a bearing in this particular race. And this simply means that we do have a friendly presiding officer of the Senate, and we have made considerable improvement in the upper body as well as the lower body, and we feel that we might make some significant progress this time if we continue to do our homework. We have been in consultation already with the attorneys for the Claimants Attorneys Association. This is a group of lawyers that represent people that injured on the job before the Workmen's Compensation Commission, and they are presently drafting some bills to take care of this particular piece of legislation. We, of course, hope to have some of our friends introduce legislation pertaining to each one of these points when the legislature convenes. And while I'm still here talking about the legislature, I think I should advise you that the Executive Board yesterday set the date of our next regular convention. And you might want to make a note of this. We haven't got the word out yet. You've got a calendar if you want to get it out. Of course, we'll be getting a communication out on this sometime in the near future, but in order that you might make sure you don't get a conflict, you might write these dates down. Be March the 25th, 6th, and 7th of next year in Jackson at this hotel. Now, the board, in their discussions yesterday, felt that since the legislature would be in session, without a doubt would be in town when we were here, that we might consider the possibility of having a banquet one night of the convention and invite the members of the legislature to attend. So you might make a note of this, that this is part of our plans also. We moved the convention up a little earlier this year than we usually have it because of the fact that the legislature would be in session. They've got where they spent about 6 months over there anyhow, and we felt if we was going to, if they were going to be in session, it would be wise to have it kind of early. And if we had any legislative matters up over there that needed a little lobbying, then we'd just send the convention over there to do the lobbying for us. So that's the reason for the early date. Now, will the sergeant at arms come forward and get resolution number 1? Barnes? Would you, Brother Barnes, would you come over here to this microphone? Barnes from Pascagoula.
Mr. Chairman, I respect the ability and the board's having the right and the executive officer in setting up this program. But I would like for this group to be advised that there is a move
Earlier believe it was, about this fact that there has been a column, I believe, that did appear in one of the Pascagoula papers, that there was a move underfoot to, I guess, do away with the Homestead Exemption Act. Now, I wasn't aware of this. It's the first time that it's been called to my attention, and probably a lot of you are not aware of it. I don't recall having read anything in any of the papers about it. Now, if the convention would like to take a position go on record in opposition to eliminating homestead exemption, I'll certainly honor a motion of that sort. If you want to go on record and to abolish it, then I'll honor one that way also. And I think probably we need some expression here. I really would like to know where you stand on this particular thing if it's going to come up in the legislature. Brother Smith? B.C. Smith from Mossy Point. You want to get the mic, or you just want to... Is that mic working over there? That mic is supposed to be working over here, Miss Smitty. Somebody check that mic and see if it's on. Now, would you check it there, Charles? It's not on?
Mr. Chairman?
Brother Smith.
I offer you a motion that this body go on record opposing the abolition of the homestead exemption.
We have a second to that motion? We have any discussion on the motion? Not all in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. That takes care of the matter, Brother Barnes. As soon as everyone gets a copy of resolution number 1, we'll proceed. Up to you on Brother Miley a while ago, I overlooked the fact he offered an amendment to a motion. I'll try not to do that again, Brother Miley. Does everyone have a copy of number 1? Chair will now recognize Secretary Treasurer Thomas Knight to present resolution number 1 to the convention.
Before I present the resolution, is either one of the sergeant-at-arms, Brother Williams? I asked Brother Hines a moment ago to see if he could get someone to get the juice on this mic. Would you check on Brother Hines now? Tell the hotel that we want the juice on the mic now and not tomorrow. Here, please, sir.
It's on.
Resolution number 1. Yes, sir. How's that? Okay, all right. Resolution number 1, submitted by the Mississippi AFL-CIO Executive Board. Whereas winning the nomination in Democratic primaries in gubernatorial contest has, without exception, in over 100 years been tantamount to election in the general election. And whereas both Republican and Democratic aspirants to the office of governor are avowed ultra-conservatives, vying with each other as to which is the greatest advocate of Goldwaterism, and whereas the election of the so-called Democratic candidate would create a vacancy in the office of the 3rd Congressional District that would be filled by a special election, and whereas the complexion of the Mississippi Senate and House of Representatives will be greatly changed due to reapportionment, defeat of some old members, and the decease and retirement of others, and whereas the Lieutenant Governor, whose duties are to preside at sessions of the Senate, as well as appoint all Senate committees, will, almost without exception, support the duly elected governor's program, considered to be a mandate of the people. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mississippi AFL-CIO COPE Convention reassemble go on record as favoring a continuance of its previously stated position at its convention in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, namely withholding any endorsement of any candidate for governor. And be it further resolved that through
our officers of the Mississippi AFL-CIO and central bodies located in the 3rd Congressional District began a search for a suitable candidate for Congress for said 3rd District, and be it further resolved that in like manner we begin an all-out effort to influence the selection of a Speaker of the Mississippi House of Representatives, and be it finally resolved that after the general election and before the convening of the legislature in January of 1968, Lieutenant Governor Charles Sullivan be conferred with regarding the organization of the Senate and offering any other assistance at our disposal. Mr. Chairman, I move the adoption of this resolution.
Now, before I open the floor for discussion, I've been requested by the Executive Board to give the convention a review of the situation with the delegates in order that certain things could be placed in the record. Might say to you that the last couple of weeks has been, to me, an exercise in frustration. I'm sure all of you are aware of the fact that, excuse me, prior to our Hattiesburg convention, we had attempted to interview all candidates for governor, including the Republican candidate for governor, Rubel Phillips. Mr. Phillips wanted to meet with the committee, but felt that he should meet with us after the Democratic primaries were over with. And we complied with this request and thought it was as it should be, thought it was appropriate. So after the primaries were over with, I contacted Mr. Phillips after making arrangements for a meeting place in Jackson, advised him where we'd meet and what time and what date, and that we would be looking forward to meeting with him. In my previous conversations with him, he even indicated a wish and a desire to address the convention. He indicated that he wanted very much the support of organized labor in this election. And if you recall, we had this in some of our communications, that there was a possibility that both gubernatorial candidates would appear before this body. After having notified Mr. Phillips of our committee meeting here night before last, I received a call from him, and he wanted a conference. So I went over to the Benbow Motel and had coffee with he and his brother. And he began then to hedge, began to sound like another candidate that was in the Democratic primary. He wanted labor support, but he didn't want anybody to know anything about it. And that if we supported him, if he received our endorsement, then he would lose some of his large financial contributors. Very obvious that the pressure was on again. Well, I advised Mr. Phillips that the only way that this organization would support any candidate for office was above board, and that we had a procedure to follow, that the candidates would have to appear before our committee, that they'd have to make certain commitments, that this convention would have to make recommendations back to the membership, that was the only way that the state AFL-CIO would formally support a candidate. And of course, I further pointed out to him what kind of a combination and a coalition of forces it would take for him to be elected governor. So a few more days passed, and he wanted another conversation, some more conversation. So this time we had it on the telephone. And he told me then, but he seemed to be very disturbed over the fact that this organization might endorse him even though he didn't want it. And I told him that I didn't think there was any danger of this organization going on record in support of a candidate that didn't want our support. But he told me that he would meet with our committee. He had to be out of town, it would be kind of late, but he would be back in town. So I told him we'd hold a committee till he got there. The day the committee was to meet, I got a telephone call from his campaign manager. I told the committee earlier it was his law partner, but I found out last night it was actually his state campaign manager. Showing concern over what might happen at this convention, and re-emphasize the fact that Mr. Phillips did not want the endorsement of the state AFL-CIO. Well, I began rather exasperated about this time and told him that I didn't think there was any damn danger in this happening, that this organization wasn't going to embarrass Mr. Phillips like this. So we had our committee meeting, and Mr. Phillips didn't show. Then a few other things began to happen. After our meeting yesterday, I got a telephone call last night from Mr. Phillips's brother. They had had a caucus with the Phillips family. They had done a little adding and subtracting, decided where the votes were in the state, decided that they needed our support. Well, I had to advise this gentleman that this time was too late, that the organization had already, part of the formalities had taken place, the committee had met, Mr. Phillips hadn't appeared before us, and one of our ground rules that applies in this situation that we don't recommend or support a candidate that will not meet with our committee. And that we had already, that the State COPE Committee had met, and that our recommendations had already been formulated that would be presented to this convention, but that I would advise the delegates of their desire in this situation. So I've got that obligation out of the way now. And you've got the committee's recommendations before you. Now we find ourselves in a most unusual situation. And I think, as Brother Knight pointed to you here this morning, I'll tell you, that things will be quite different 4 years from now, provided we do our homework. And I think we'll be doing that. On the other hand, the Democratic nominee, Mr. John Bell Williams, who's been in the Congress now for over 20 years, ignored us. We wrote him and invited him to meet with our committee, and all I got was a letter back from one of his assistants advising that they had received the letter and that they would be in touch with us at a later date. And this never happened, as you know. Now, realizing the fact that you will be working and probably voting in this election, the committee felt that I should read into the record certain facts and information that you might find interesting, relating to not just Mr. Phillips, but to Mr. Williams as well. This man has been in the Congress for over 20 years and has probably the worst voting record on legislation affecting the masses of the people of this state than any other single individual. He has consistently been rated, given 100% by the Americans for Constitutional Action, an ultra-conservative outfit, which grades a man according to his votes on social legislation. And I want today to show you what some of those issues are and what they really mean to Mississippi and what this man has actually been doing against the people of Mississippi. And they're not issues affecting organized labor at all. Now, the record is, frankly, that he's consistently voted against labor legislation, period. Taft, he voted for Taft, Hartley, Landon, Griffin, against repeal of 14B. But we're not going to make this a labor issue. We want to talk to you and show you what he's done to the masses here and what it amounts to in dollars and cents. All of you are aware of the fact that our state has the lowest per capita income of any state in the nation, and that we have a higher percentage of illiterates than most any other state in the nation. We have a real problem on people being unemployed, uneducated, and unemployable. No state in the nation needs the OEO programs any more than does our state. Yet the record shows that Mr. Williams not only voted against the creation of the Office of Economic Opportunity, but he's done his best to keep some programs from coming into our state. Back in the month of April, I think it was, I testified before the subcommittee, the Senate subcommittee here in this hotel in this room, about the need of these programs in our state and the fact that they should be further expanded and not restricted. At that time, Mississippi had received over $90 million in federal funds in the Mississippi to finance these programs. Today, that figure is over $100 million. Going next to aid to education. All of you know what the situation is in our state concerning our schools. Been a lot of discussion in the current governor's campaign about the need to upgrade our educational institutions, raise our teachers' salaries, and things of this kind. Mississippi simply does not have the resources to get the job done, which means that no state needs federal aid to education any more than does Mississippi. Yet this man has consistently voted against any act in this direction. The state superintendent of education advised me just a couple of days ago that last year Mississippi received over $49 million in federal aid to Mississippi. And he says he don't know how they could operate without what they've got. Turning now to Social Security. As of this date, we have 273,516 people on the Social Security rolls of Mississippi. This includes the dependent children and the physically handicapped. But out of that number, 210,000 are 65 years old or older. Get the significance of this. 210,000, 65 years old or older. Which means that 210,000 people in this state are eligible for the medical care program. And according to the Social Security people over here, Mr. Pate advises me that 83.10% are enrolled and participating in the program. And that this figure actually constitutes 12.6% of our state's population. He further advised me that in some counties, that figure actually runs 15 to 16%. He further advises me that during the last 4 months, that over 51,000 people in Mississippi were admitted to the hospitals and had received hospital care as a result of the Medicare program. There's been over $15 million paid into Mississippi in these 4 months for doctor bills. Another $5.5 million have been paid out to doctors in the form of doctor bills, making a total of $20.5 million sent into Mississippi as a result of the Social Security program, health care for the aged and what have you. And this doesn't take in consideration all of the programs. I've just selected about 4 or 5 to me that are very pertinent to show you that this gentleman has not been representing the majority of the people in this state. Let's look at the minimum wage law, the situation concerning minimum wage. According to the best figures available, we have 333,000 people in Mississippi that would actually be covered by the new act, the amendments and what have you, once they all go into effect. Of course, this includes people in unions and what have you. But out of that figure, according to the best information that we can come up with, over 200,000 people in Mississippi received the increase from $1.25 to $1.40. And I want you to get the significance of what this 15 cents means to the economy of Mississippi in the form of purchasing power. 200,000 times 15 gives you $30,000 an hour. 30,000 times 8 gives you $240,000 per day. 240,000 times 40 gives you $9,600,000 per week. $9,600,000 times 52 gives you $499,200,000, almost $500 million, which means that the economy of this state will be boosted by $500 million as a result of the 15-cent increase. This is not the whole picture. This is just the 15 cents. This doesn't take in consideration the other people that were brought in, the hotel restaurant people, the laundry people, the farm workers. This is not included, just the 15 cents. The Executive Board thought you ought to have that information. When we reproduce the minutes of this convention, it will be part of the record. Now, the floor is open for discussion on resolution number 2. Do we have any discussion? We ready for the question? This is not a very talkative group today, is it? The one that you have before you is the one concerning the general election, where we are taking no position and making other recommendations, other suggestions. Are you ready for the question? All in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Well, that takes care of the major work of the convention. We need to make a few announcements. I had and was in hopes that we would get a little discussion about from the floor on some of the activity we had in our central body areas. I talked with the boys from Harrison County who have done a real effective job down there. I thought it would be of interest to you to hear from them as to how they did that effective job. And here he comes now. I'm going to ask Brother Williams to do this time. They have probably got a better batting average than any of the rest of us have. That's the main reason we wanted to find out how they did it. It might give you folks some ideas in the future. Come on up here, Billy.
I'm Billy Williams. I'm from the Harrison County CLU, and I'd like to thank you, Brother Ramsey, for giving us a chance to give the rest of this group an insight on our political activities in Harrison County. In Harrison County, of course, we use a system that's not used by, I think, any other county in the state of Mississippi. That's hand billing, pure and simple. You talk to these legislative candidates, and you promise them that you'll support them. Well, that don't go too far. Harrison County is notorious for its rallies. We have about 75 a year. At these rallies, they range anywhere from 200 people to 2,500. They have this group down there called the LLBs. And I'm sure you've all heard of serving beer at a wake to draw a crowd. Well, this LLB is a lot of booze, and they come to it. Now, myself being new in this, I had to rely on this, our Jackson office, and I'd like to take this time now to thank the secretaries and the officers for doing the printing of the ballots. In the second primary, we actually printed and distributed in excess of 31,000 ballots. That'll keep you up nights and days, and the candidates, of course, they'll keep you entertained in between times. But I will say it can be entertaining. You can have a good time. We had some enjoyable moments, and we had some that weren't so enjoyable. But in starting this thing off, I'd like to say in Harrison County, we managed to carry every candidate that we recommended in Hattiesburg but one, and that was in the Public Service Commission. We let him down. But we kept getting these calls out of Jackson constantly. They didn't mean harassment, but I took it as such from Brother Knight wanting to know what the political climate was down there. Me being you, I didn't know what to do. He said, run a canvass the area, count the bumper stickers, anything. So we immediately set out doing that, and I called him up one day, and I said, well, Tom, I said, William Winter's got a 0.5% average in first place. Sullivan's running very good in Harrison County, and Black's in second. I got on down about the Public Service Commission, and he immediately stopped me, and he said, wait a minute now. He said, who's in second place in the governor's race? I said, Six Flags Over Texas, and that wound up the cause. I don't believe they heard that. Anyway, we were allowed this time 3 Senate seats and 7 people in the House of Representatives. In the Senate, we supported Tommy Monroe. He went in the first primary. And I've heard this talk about Rubel Phillips and John Bell Williams. Well, in the second Senate post 2, we supported Sherman L. Muse in the first primary, swapped over and supported Nap Casper in the second primary, and won. We promised Nap Casper that we would give him in excess of 3,000 votes. Mr. Casper won with a total vote of 15,870, and Mr. Muse had 12,084. After he made his threats, he would beat us in the second primary without our support. In the third representative post, Ben Stone went in over the candidate that we had endorsed, but we can't win them all. Now, in your representatives, of course, Post 1 is held by Jim True. He is president of the White Citizens Council, and therefore he received no endorsement from us. We hope in the next 4 years to have a real good candidate lined up to run against Mr. True. Post 2, we have Galot, who won in the first primary, and in going over his questionnaire and everything, I think he'll make us a good representative. Although he was not recommended by the Harrison County CLU, we had an incumbent whose wife is employed by the plumbers, and that influenced it a little. It was backed by us. In Post 3, we don't have anyone. We have Clyde Woodfield, and Pringle is the incumbent, and they will run it off in the general election. Now, we will have questionnaires mailed out to them. They've already been mailed out, and they will be interviewed, and we'll have some action in that post. Post 4, we have C.L. Bullock. He is an incumbent and a very good legislator. I think he made us a good one last time. In Post 5, we have a boy that I'm sure you don't know, but you'll be hearing a lot of, Elton L. Bolton. Now, Bolton will tell you, without labor, he could not have gone in. And he is a good representative. He's a good lawyer. And he also works in the office of the late Senator Howard McDonald, who did not choose to run this year because of the sessions. In Post 6, we got Jim Simpson. He was endorsed by Harrison County CLU, went in the first primary. And in Post 7, to send with this group up here, we couldn't find a vet to run, so we sent an MD, Dr. Tisdale. And he is an outspoken, very adamant defender of the unions. He even got out, and whenever we were handing out these hand ballots, you'd look around, he'd be heavy. Now, some of the citizens of Harrison County, they didn't go for this all. I mean, it's not all. It's just a little love and a little war down there. And they didn't go for it wholeheartedly, but you got to take a little of that. And if any of you'd like to try it, I would thoroughly recommend it. I mean, it's an experience that is very rewarding, and you can add some new words to your vocabulary and just have a ball. Now, on this resolution number 2 here, many of these things that you're asking for, we've already got the elected representatives and senators writing bills to put in the hopper the day that they start. That's about all I have. I got a mighty good helper here sitting back there. If he's got anything to add, he might want to add some highlights. Mr. T.L. Niecase, without him, this program could not have been carried out at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother William. Brother Niecase, you have anything to add to those remarks? Well, me too. They don't want to call him at midnight. They call me at Jackson, too. I got several of those telephone calls. That's right. That's right. I thought that it might help some of you to hear from the Harrison County group that's done a real effective job. And we know from past experience down there that a lot of people outside the labor movement who are not members actually want to know who the candidates are that labor is supporting in order that they can vote for them. Now, the sample ballot, I think, how many thousand we put out? 31. put out 31,000 sample ballots in Harrison County. That's what these fellas did, 31,000 sample ballots. And this was done 4 years ago and they were effective, so they did it again. It might be well for some of you to consider the possibility of a sample ballot in the future elections where Labor's candidates marked. Now, we're about to come to the end of the convention, but we would like to advise you of a program that we're going to try to put on in the state next year, working with our central bodies, and in those areas where we don't have central bodies, we will try to be working with the local unions because we've got to do this all over the state. Brother Knight talked to you here this morning about the fact that we've got a problem with our election officials in various areas of the state, and that matter can be corrected only one way, and that's for our people and our friends to become active at the precinct level and the precinct conventions, do our best to elect the proper people to the Democratic Executive Committees throughout the state. I fear that a lot of our people are not familiar with the fact that this is the beginning of the problem. If we're going to lick this problem, then we've got to get the right people in these positions. And of course it goes on up, elect your people to the county election, to the county conventions, and to the state convention, who in turn elect the delegates to the national convention. But the key to good elections in this state is at the precinct convention, where the party machinery is really organized. So we're going to try to come in next year, set up a program around the state and the various central bodies, and in those areas where we don't have central bodies, try to hold some kind of a conference whereby we can school our people in this matter of going into the precinct meetings, get themselves elected, and take over the control of the party machinery in those counties. Now, we'd like to again announce that we'd like a caucus of the congressional delegates. The delegates from the 3rd Congressional District, we can meet up here in this corner immediately after we adjourn. We'll try not to keep you too long. But considering the fact that there's a good possibility that there will be a vacancy in the 3rd Congressional District, we felt that we ought to have a huddle before you leave here and find out what you think needs to be done about the situation. I didn't know that. Well, congratulations. I just been advised that Jack Thompson, one of the sergeant-at-arms, where's he at? Was elected justice of the peace in Forest County. Beat 4. Where you at, Jack?
Stand up, Judge.
Stand up. Take up, bow. Stand up. Congratulations. I'm sure I speak for everybody. You got 2 of them now, huh? Good. Well, I know where to go the next time I get one of them speeding tickets, will it? All right. Brother Knight wants to take a few minutes, make an announcement or two, and discuss with you the fair project that's coming up next month. Brother Knight.
If I may, I think I should say this in addition to what I said earlier, with all respect to our folks over the state. In addition to the legislative races where we've taken a part, in a number of counties, local candidates were endorsed by the central bodies, for instance, for supervisors, sheriff, clerks, things of this kind, and a lot of these people won. Now, this is something I omitted that I shouldn't have, but we had more success in offices of this kind than we had ever had before. I don't think Brother Clark, President of the Meridian Council, would object if I kid him just a little here and share with you an experience that I had over there one night. That particular central body created quite a bit of activity over there, and certainly I don't mean this to be disrespectful. They was busy. They were at work in Meridian. they made an endorsement over there that really brought on a lot of talk. And what I'm trying to say now to you is there was something real funny happened at this meeting I attended. The controversy was over the race for sheriff. I think you had about 8 or 10. Is that right, LD? Well, a number of those characters were down at the meeting that night. Incidentally, they had an overflow crowd at the Central Labor Union meeting. And to show you what some of these people will do to try to get labor support, one gentleman got up there and he says, "My friends," he says, "I ought to have labor support." He says, "I'm entitled to it. I've been here with you all my life." And he went through what he had done, what he was. And he says, besides that, he says, "I carry a card in the Farm Bureau." And then he sat down. LD had to call time on him as they had to threaten to throw 2 or 3 of them out, as a matter of fact, to get them to shut up. LD called time on him, and he says, "In conclusion, I'm going to be your sheriff." You know how many votes he got? He got 275. That's just a round figure. Brother Clark, I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but I felt like they'd enjoy what he said about belonging to the Farm Bureau. Now, one other thing I want to talk to you just a minute about. Since we met in convention here last year, we undertaken something that hadn't been done here in Mississippi by labor over once, and I think that was prior to the merger of the AFL and the CIO. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of 1966, the Executive Board authorized the Executive Committee and officers of the Council to look into the possibility of renting space at the Mississippi State Fairgrounds and displaying a variety of merchandise and products made by union labor in Mississippi. Well, we did that last year. We had 2 10-by-10 spaces down in the industry building at the State Fair. As you know, the fair is held in October. Now, most of you are familiar with this. I'm sure some may not be. We're real pleased with the job that was done down there, thanks to you and the other people over the state, to the union employers, to the international reps, the business agents who contacted the employers to get the displays and those things that could be used by individuals that were donated and were given away as prizes. And thanks to the many good, faithful union members and to their locals who volunteered their time and came to Jackson and worked around the clock for 6 days and nights to man this booth and to talk to the people as they come by. It was most interesting to see the look on the faces of some 9,000 people that we talked to and registered on a 3x5 card when they looked to find that set of horns that they thought we had. They really looked and expected to see the people behind that booth with a set of horns equal to a Bremer bull on LBJ's ranch in Texas. And they didn't find a single person with horns. So we did a real public relations job for the labor movement in Mississippi. I have been told by numerous individuals from over this state that are not a part of the labor movement who came by that display and who registered what a good job they thought was done and the manner in which our people conducted themselves. I was told by the secretary manager of the Mississippi Fair Commission that our group was one of the nicest groups that he had ever had the privilege of working with. As a result of this, our committee recommended that we do this again. So we have a third more space this time. The fair is an 8-day affair this time. It starts on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, October 10th, and goes through Tuesday night, October 17th. This is the longest it's ever been held. This includes 6 hours on Sunday, from 12 noon until 6 o'clock Sunday. We have again asked that all of the locals in the state that can to send us one person
3 people, 5 people, a half a dozen members to Jackson one day to help man the fair booth. It takes from 4 to 5 or 6 people on duty at all times to man the booth. We don't expect one group from one local to come to Jackson work from 9 in the morning till 10:30, 11 that night. We want enough locals to volunteer the services of enough delegates that we won't have to ask one group to serve over 4 hours at the longest. Consequently, they can go get them something to eat and visit the fair. But we are going to need quite a few people to help man this booth like it should be. The organizing department was kind enough last year to lend us the services of our good buddy, Brother Joe Mullins over here. And I've asked him to give us his services again. And if we don't get it, I'm going to find out why. Because Joe did a tremendous job in helping me to keep things going. The merchandise is already coming in. We have a carload here now that we're going to have to unload around at our office after this convention's over. The displays, companies that didn't participate before are already volunteering to send us displays and gifts this time. We gave away 55 nice prizes last year, and people were completely flabbergasted when their name was pulled out of the box at night and they were called on the phone or received a card from us telling them that they had won something. I had one lady to tell me, I'm not going to sign one of them old cards. Some old salesman will call on me next week, and I just don't want to be worried with him. Well, we tried to tell them nobody was going to call on them. The prizes ranged all the way from just a common cotton short-sleeve sports shirt or a little can opener, knife sharpener combination to enough finished material to do the inside of one room, regardless of the size, doors, and all completed. A set of white sidewall automobile tires. The lady that won the tires, I don't think she's got over it yet. She had come up to the office and looked at them 2 or 3 times before she ever decided that she had really won them and should take them home. So people are so used to being hijacked, so to speak, and swindled, and in things of this kind, until we really made a name for ourselves. A party was overheard tell another one that he never saw one group of people draw as much attention as that crowd in the AFL-CIO. The other party says, well, what are they selling? He says, they ain't selling it, they're giving it away. So I tell you, we did a bang-up job for you and the people back home. So what I'm saying is this. At 9 o'clock on October the 10th, we're going to undertake to do a much better job for you than we did a year ago. We have asked all international unions to provide us with as many pieces of material appropriate for distribution to the public as they can give us. We are asking them to also provide us with as many little souvenir items like nail files, rulers, anything of this kind, giveaway items as they can provide in order that we have something to give the people. We have litter bags. We'll have litter bags with the Mississippi AFL-CIO name on them this time. We're going to sack this stuff to be sure that in addition to the souvenirs that we give them, have a propaganda, because we want them to know something more about the trade union movement. And we also want people on hand at all times that can talk to these people and tell them something about what our organization is and what it stands for. And believe you me, I think, again, let me say, that this is one of the finest projects that we've ever undertaken. And we have more room this time. We're going to go all out to do a good job for the labor movement in this state. And we ask your help. Now, several locals have given me notes and information here yesterday and today as to personnel to assist us. Those of you that hadn't replied to our letter, we would appreciate a reply real early. Now, we told you in the letter if you have a certain day that it would be more convenient to name that day, and if at all possible, we'll try to work your delegates in on that day. I don't think we've got but about 100 that wants to come on Friday. So, but seriously, we may not be able to use you on the day you would prefer, but we will work out the schedule just as best as we possibly can in order to not conflict with your schedule. And if you're a business agent, if you're an international rep, if you hadn't yet asked the employer with whom you deal for a display, if you make something that would be of no good as a gift, certainly, we understand this. But we do want a display. If you're in an industry that makes something that can be used by the individual, we'd like for them to agree for us to give that item away as a prize at the end of the week. I'd like to say this, that the carpenters were kind enough to donate their work in our booth last year. The movie operators local furnished the lighting for the booth, and the union print shop here did the printing of our cards, which clearly indicates the local number, the union, and the name of the company. And all three of these unions have graciously consented again to do the same thing. And we would like to hear from you just as rapidly as possible. We need all gifts and all displays, either in our office or arrangements made for you to carry them to the fairground by Friday, October the 6th, in order that we can arrange the display in the manner in which it should be. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brother Knight. Do we have any other announcements? A meeting of the delegates from the 5th District, Congressional 5th District, in that end. All delegates from the 5th Congressional District in that end. All delegates from the 3rd Congressional District in this end. Do we have any other announcements? If not, we will adjourn this convention sine die, and we hope you all the best of luck, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime in the spring and to work on the precinct conventions. Good luck to all of you.